Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. How's everybody doing today? Just running just a little late. Not quite late, but was definitely rushing. Where did I? Okay. Gotta clean my glasses real quick. But yeah, hello. Welcome to my book garden. Actually, welcome to my basement. But it's got books and kind of flowers. So it works. Make do. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to the second to last stream of Peach Blossom Debt. Excited for this. Regarding that, I do not own anything connected to Peach Blossom Debt. I don't make any money from this stream. This is just me doing it because I can. So please don't come at me about copyright or for copyright, because I'm just doing this because I love books and Danmei. So on that note, this is kind of a chill stream. I will be talking to whoever pops in, whoever doesn't, sometimes to people that aren't here. If that's not really your flavor, I mean, hopefully if you're reaching this stream, like it is. But if not, I totally get it. Maybe stay around, see if you end up enjoying it, but if not, no hard feelings. I don't see anyone in the chat. Did I do the wrong one? Hang on. Let me make sure. I'm pretty sure I clicked on the right one. Uh-oh. Let me see. No, I clicked on the right one. All right. Well, that's good. Well, yeah. Anyone has any new things that happened over the weekend? It's been kind of a longer period since we met up, just because I had some things I had to take care of last week. But they went well. Everything's good. Everyone's healthy. So that's the important thing. But yeah. Let me just get my beverage of choice ready today. And then I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I don't really see anyone in here today. Maybe people will show up in a bit. And if not, whoever's watching this later, I hope you enjoy. Oh, yeah, last time. So our boys, well, mainly our boy, decided to interfere in what was supposed to happen to the two star-crossed lovers. And Hengwen is now a child, as well as Tianshu. They're both children, but they're heavenly children, as in both de-aged, but in their heavenly bodies. So Hengwen actually doesn't remember Song Yao, which is a problem. And we had some not so consensual kissing last time. And then our dude Song Yao was like, this is not okay. You won't even spare a youth. You're even worse than an animal. Oh, Jade Emperor, how could I have done such a deed? So he's like, I can't keep snuggling with Hengwen. He doesn't know me. He's young. This is not okay. Which, thankfully, he realized very, very quickly that it was not okay. Because it's not. So he was like, there was only a few days left, but Hengwen was still a youngster who could not recognize Song Yao for what he was. I let loose a long, dejected sigh. Even if there was only these few days left, we could not continue sleeping like this anymore. Agreed. And on that note, we start chapter 20. As Hengwen slumbered, I sat alone at the table all night. When the day started to break, I went out to the yard to stand for a moment. Then I retrieved cold water, wiped my face, and strolled around. The young servant and maidservants were all panic-stricken when they stepped out of their rooms to see me staring blankly in the yard. They washed me up again, and I took some mouthfuls of the tea that a maidservant brewed. By now, the sky had lightened, and Tianshu and Hengwen got out of bed. I had sent young servant out to the street to buy 2 bamboo steamers of steamed buns beforehand. When they were served during breakfast, Hengwen and Tianshu's eyes lit up. Oh yeah, they both are loving on meat buns, which I think is great. Delicious, Hengwen declared after he reached out with his chopsticks and had a bite. Though in a muffled voice and with a smile, Tianshu brought one onto his plate. You had them buy these, right? Hengwen said to me. They taste better than the ones yesterday. If you like them, I'll get them to buy again tomorrow morning, I said. Hengwen immediately smiled in delight. Tianshu looked at the saucer of chili paste on the table. He tentatively picked up a steamed bun and dipped it in the sauce before taking a small bite. So you can even add seasoning, he exclaimed with pleasure. Hengwen immediately picked up another one and imitated him. His eyes widened. Whoa, it tastes a little different now. I could not help feeling amused as I watched them being all so innocent. At that moment, I remembered what had happened last night, and my heart sank once again. Hengwen looked at me with a frown and asked, Are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere? No, I crinkled up my face into a smile. Holding a steamed bun with his chopsticks, Tianshu, too, blinked at me. After breakfast, Hengwen said, The small steamed buns are delicious, but when it comes to the big ones, the ones from the day before yesterday are better. Still hung up on Third Granny Huang's steamed buns, I see. There was really nothing I could do about this. Every shop had their own distinctive flavor. A pity Third Granny Huang did not sell steamed buns. I mean, I'm sure you could be like, hey, can I do a deal with you? My sons love your steamed buns. Oh yeah, they're pretending to be sons. After voicing his thoughts, Hengwen said nothing further on the subject and went to feed the fox. I went to the courtyard to bask in the sun. Tianshu had found a book somewhere and was reading it on the covered walkway. After Hengwen had fed the fox, he stepped out of the small hall and made his way down the walkway towards the backyard. From where I was standing, I managed to glimpse Third Granny Huang leaning against the back door as she chatted with the cook. Hengwen greeted her. Oh, I think we have some more steamed buns coming. Hengwen greeted her. Third Granny Huang was naturally overjoyed, and her hands trembled as she complimented him for being such a sensible young master who did not put on airs. Hengwen was all grins as he answered, This junior is flattered. I should thank you instead. None of the steamed buns I've tried thus far can compare to the ones you gave us. My father and brother love them too. As he spoke, there was no covering the insatiable hunger on his face. Third Granny Huang was so elated she could hardly speak. It was only after a while that she shakily said, Since the young master loves them, I will bring my old self back and steam some to send over. Really? Hengwen said. Then I'll be so grateful. I broke out in a sweat watching from the side. If I were to make my appearance now, Third Granny Huang would no doubt grab me to rain praises and compliments for most of the day. So after another look from my side of the moon gate, I wisely walked away. Back at the walkway, the young servant announced that there was a guest at the doors requesting to see me, and this guest was an old woman. An old woman? Was this immortal lord somehow catching the romantic interest of old ladies these days? I entered the hall to welcome the guest, and the young servant led the old lady in. I fixed my eyes on her. She looked somewhat familiar. Perhaps the old lady from the marketplace who had gifted Hengwen and Tianshu their walnuts and peanuts. The old lady curtsied upon entering and introduced herself. This old one is from the Lu Hu household. Greetings to young Master Song. I invited her to take a seat with some apprehension. We had only met in the marketplace yesterday, and today she knew my surname, clearly having asked around. She must have come here for a purpose. Just one greeting, and my mind swarmed with suspicions as to what exactly that was. Madame Lu Hu sat on the chair and sized up the furnishings in the hall. With a smile, she said to me, "Your house is so exquisitely decorated. You only have just moved, and yet you've tidied it up so well." "Not at all," I answered. "This humble one actually has not put in even a fraction of effort. The credit belongs to all the others," which was the truth. The old lady continued, "You really are too modest. May I know where you are from?" I could only make something up. "My hometown is in Jiangxi." "Oh my," the old lady exclaimed. "Jiangnan is a good place. Do you plan to stay in the city for the long term or the short term?" We'll see if we can get used to staying here," I answered ambiguously. "If so, we'll stay here for a longer period." "Actually," Madame Lu Hu said, "this city may not be big, but it can be considered prosperous. What's most important is that it's stable. This world isn't at peace right now, and the eastern and southern commanderies are at war year in, year out. I heard that the imperial court even recently deployed troops to join forces with the eastern commandery and attack the southern one, destroying several of the southern commandery cities in the process. The general of the southern commandery was even beaten to death by his own soldiers who revolted. Living in peace is hard when all is not stable in the world. There aren't many cities in the world like ours where you can live a peaceful life. It's stable. So in this old one's opinion, since you are already here and have bought a home, why not stay longer?" I followed her lead and nodded. "You're right." What was the old lady's purpose circling the conversation like this? The old lady picked up the teacup from the table and took a sip to moisten her throat before settling it down. With her old pair of eyes, she looked at this immortal lord and asked, as presumptuous as it is of me, "May I ask your age?" What was she asking this for? This immortal lord was 23 years old when I ascended, so I was about to answer 23 when I remembered in the nick of time I still had two exalted lords who looked to be youths in the courtyard. My sons. So I replied, "Nearly 40. Madame Lu Hu shook her head. "You don't look your age at all. If my old self had not seen the two young masters, then even if you had said you were in your early 20s, I'd have believed you." I mean, well, yes. This immortal lord's face is clearly the face of someone in his early 20s. Madame Lu Hu covered her mouth and laughed. "You're right in the prime of life. The two little masters are still young. Have you never thought of remarrying?" And we have found the point. So, the old lady was here to play matchmaker for this immortal lord. A marriage proposal knocking on my door the moment this immortal lord came to live in the mortal world. Was it really possible that my fate of eternal solitude could be changed? Seeing my blank silence, the old lady continued, "This old one has a wonderful potential candidate here to matchmake you with. There is a fabric store to the north of the city. It's not a big shop, but business is good. The fabrics worn by the wealthy and influential households in the city are all from them. Shopkeeper Feng of the fabric store has a daughter who is 17 this year. Though she's not really a lady from a wealthy and influential household, her dowry is quite generous and she's a good match for you, looks and character-wise. This old one isn't just matchmaking you at random. Come to think of it, this young lady has had the affinity of meeting you twice already. This immortal lord heard rustling from behind the screen and guessed that Hengwen and Tianshu were crouching behind it to listen. Madame Lu Hu continued. The first is that the clothes the two young masters are wearing are made by the Feng household's fabric shop. There are still several pieces of clothes being rushed. As for the second encounter, you should still remember it. The lady who bumped into you on the street yesterday before the rose shop is young Miss Feng. Is that not a match made in heaven? I chuckled wearily at that. This matter was quite the curious coincidence, but it was definitely not a match made in heaven. Cleared my throat and explained that I was new here and still unfamiliar with the place. Besides, remarriage was such a major event, so I had to consider it seriously. What's more, young Missy Feng was still young, and I feared I would do her a great wrong if she were to marry into the family to be a stepmother. So we should talk about it after careful consideration. These were the excuses I used to fob her off. By the time a decision had been made, this immortal lord would have long been taken to the immortal execution terrace. There he goes again. Madame Lu Hu was all smiles as she said, No rush, no rush. This matter is not urgent. Give it a few days, and my old self will see how it goes after you've mulled it over. After some more prattling, the old lady bade her farewell and left. Before she stepped out, she added, Shopkeeper Feng also had this old one pass on a message to you. The two young masters' clothes are ready and will be delivered at noon. I said my thanks again, and the old lady finally left. I headed back to the hall and picked up a cup of tea to moisten my throat. The young girl yesterday actually fell in love with this immortal lord at first bump, and her family had sent someone over to propose marriage today. Evidently, I was still as irresistible as I had been in those olden days. Sure you are, stud. Hengwen and Tianshu stepped out from behind the screen. Hengwen looked at me with his black, shiny eyes. Did that old madam come over earlier to tell you that someone wants to be your wife? Yes, I answered. Is it the one who threw her handkerchief yesterday? Tianshu asked. Nope. Hengwen wrinkled his nose. I heard that old woman say that it was the one who bumped into you. That's right, I admitted. Immortals cannot marry mortals, Hengwen said. I know, I replied. That's why I stalled by saying we'll discuss it again in a few days. By then, it'll be time for us to go back. A smile spread on Hengwen's face. Are we going back to the heavenly court together? I plastered on a smile. Yes. Only then did Hengwen stop asking and run off to the small hall to visit Furball. That's quite a sentence. Ran off to the small hall to visit Furball. It's almost a rhyme. At noon, the Feng's fabric shop really did send a store assistant over to deliver Hengwen's and Tianshu's clothes. When the assistant collected his reward, he fixed his eyes on me and sized me up like he was buying meat and picking the cuts. Then he looked at Hengwen and Tianshu. In all probability, shopkeeper Feng had sent him here to appraise his potential future son-in-law. I wondered how he would describe my charms when he returned. As the maidservant cleared the table after our lunch, the young servant came to report that there was another guest at the back door who insisted on seeing this immortal lord. I sure was in high demand today. The young servant ushered the person in. It was a delicate-looking little servant girl dressed as a study attendant. "My lady instructed me to deliver an invitation for tea tasting," she said crisply, and held out a pink scented letter with both hands. I reached out to accept it, and the servant girl continued. "Could I ask you to please head over to the back door? The person in the carriage outside would like to invite you for a chat." Rather offhandedly, I set the scented letter on the small table and followed the servant girl out of the back door. A horse carriage draped with satin curtains was parked by the door, and another servant girl stood before it. She bowed to me and said, "Young Master Song, please stand before the carriage. Our lady has something to say to you." So I stood by the carriage curtains. A sweet, delicate voice floated out from the curtains. "This lowly one has come in person to extend an invitation in the hope that young Master Song will come over to Shu Yue Pavilion at dusk today for tea. I wonder if I could possibly ask you to grace me with your presence." A breeze surfed past, not at all like the chilly wind of early winter, but the warm breeze of spring. "Since a beautiful woman has invited me, how could this humble one dare to refuse?" I replied. The two servant girls covered their mouths and tittered. The charming voice on the other end of the curtain said, "In that case, this lowly one shall return to Shiyu Pavilion to light the incense and fine-tune the kin in silent anticipation of your arrival." The horse carriage turned around and left at a leisurely pace. I said my farewell as I saw them off. When I returned to the hall, Hengwen and Tianshu were reading that scented letter together. Hengwen looked up at me. "This says to invite you to Shu Yue Pavilion in the evening for tea. The fragrance is so strong. It's the one who threw her handkerchief yesterday?" This immortal lord nodded in tacit acknowledgement. I took the pink letter from their hands and tucked it away under the robes over my chest. Hengwen and Tianshu were both looking at me. Hengwen asked, "Are you going?" I yawned. "Time for an afternoon nap." Tianshu returned to his chamber accordingly. Hengwen, however, followed me, taking one step for every one I took. When we reached the door to his chamber, I opened it for him. "Take a nap." Hengwen made a noise of acknowledgement and entered, and I returned to my own quarters. Looking at the empty bed, I sighed. Just as I was about to close the doors, Hengwen strode in. I asked in an affable voice, "Why aren't you sleeping?" Hengwen blinked and ran over to the bed. He sat on it and flashed a grin. "This bed feels more comfortable to me than the one in my room." At that moment, I felt like a piece of pot sticker suffocating in the wok, sizzling in the oil and stifled by the fumes. It felt terrible. Could only say, "Since you like this room, I'll trade with you. Starting from noon today, you'll stay here and I'll sleep in yours." Hengwen, who was pulling the quilt open and nestling into the bed, turned his head to me. "Why? The bed can accommodate both of us, can't it? I can sleep with you here." I rubbed my forehead, not whorehead. That's the other end. "It's always a little crowded, sharing the same bed. Sleep well." I turned and made to leave. Behind me, I heard Hengwen getting off the bed. "I get it now. You don't actually like sleeping on the same bed as me." I turned back and looked at his somewhat downcast face, but I held back and said nothing. Hengwen lowered his head. "I understand. I won't bother you anymore. I'll return to my chamber for a nap." He pushed the quilt back and walked out with his head hanging. I watched him go. The flame cooking the pot sticker was unusually strong, and hot oil bubbled over, searing my heart and inside so that they sizzled. I closed the door, sat at the table, drank 2 cups of tea, then took out Miss Qingxian's handkerchief, looking it over. Could peach blossoms really bloom on the old wizen tree that this immortal lord had been for thousands of years? When it was close to dusk, I changed into a brand new set of attire and scented it so that both sleeves gave off a delicate, refreshing fragrance. Hengwen led a group of children into the yard to play, placing bets on the outcome of the game. Tianshu kept a piece of inkstone and a brush close by, to play referee and draw on the losers' faces. The children, except for Tianshu and Hengwen, more or less all ended up with their faces decorated in ink. I informed the young servant and maidservants that I would not be eating dinner at home and could possibly be back late, so they were to take good care of the young masters. With that, I made to leave. Tianshu and Hengwen were in the midst of having fun, but Tianshu set down his brush and ran over. "Are you going out?" "Yes," I answered. "I have something on." Tianshu made a noise of acknowledgement and asked no further, while Hengwen turned his head aside to look at me, his eyes flickering for the briefest moment before he lowered it again to continue playing chess. This time, when this immortal lord took to the streets, I was finally a patron taking a leisurely stroll to the brothel, not the baggage-laden person of yesterday. A pity it was getting late. Everywhere on the street, stalls were packing up and shops were shuttering down, while pedestrians came and went in a rush. And at this hour, the young girls from decent families would not be out here wandering around. This made me feel a little lonely. When I arrived at Shu Yue Pavilion, the rogue stall had yet to wind up for the day. The young lad who set up the stall drew back and looked at me, then at Shu Yue Pavilion. Shu Yue Pavilion. An ornate chamber, a tune of yearning, drinking to my heart's content. Does young Master Song find this lowly one's tune to be still acceptable for your ears? Xing Xian pushed aside her kin, inlaid with jade, and smiled at me with tender affection, her ravishing beauty lighting up the entire chamber. "Excellent," I complimented. "Even better than Chang Yi from the Moon Palace." Xing Xian covered her mouth and gave a charming smile. "Young Master sure is an old hand at coaching others." "Your praises leave me at a loss as to how to respond." Really? With dainty steps, she walked gracefully to me, then rolled up her crimson sleeves a little to lift the wine jar and refill my cup. She showed her wrists. How scandalous. It was only when the moon was high in the sky that I dragged my half-drunken steps back to the small courtyard. Before leaving, Xing Xian called me Song Long, as one would a lover, placed a scented sachet into my hand, and wistfully asked, "Will my husband come again tomorrow?" This immortal lord heaved a long sigh, held her fair, slender hands, and answered, "With a beautiful woman waiting for me, how could I not?" That scented sachet was fragrant, and the wind that stirred in my wake seemed to be infused with its fragrance too. With 2 jars of wine in my arms, I dragged myself back to my room, startling the young servant in the process. Hurried off to prepare hot water, and after stepping out from my bath, I sobered up a little. Although I changed my clothes, the sachet scent still lingered. I initially meant to return to my room and drink 2 more cups of wine to relieve my boredom. Sitting before the bed, I took the scented sachet and handkerchief out together for a look, but without realizing it, I tilted over onto the bed and fell asleep. I opened my eyes the following day to find myself covered with a quilt. The handkerchief was on my chest, and I was still holding the scented sachet. My clothes that I had worn last night were intact too. I got up to shout for the young servant to attend to me as I washed up, only to see a small plate with 2 steamed buns on it set aside beside the wine jar on the table. The young servant told me, "Master, you fell asleep last night, and this lowly one did not dare to startle you awake, so I merely covered you with a quilt. The little young master Hengwen left you these 2 steamed buns while he was having his meal. He refused to sleep and insisted on waiting for you to return to give them to you. But when he brought them over after your bath, you had already fallen asleep. So he left them on the table and went to bed." I looked at the 2 steamed buns, my heart simmering again in hot, searing oil. And still, all I could say was, "All right, understood." Hengwen only stepped out of his room when it was time for breakfast. He looked at me but said nothing as he took a seat at the table. This time around, both Hengwen and Tianshu ate quite a lot. Well, it's because it's their favorite buns. Later that evening, third Granny Huang came to chat with the cook again. As I happened to be strolling in the backyard, I took the chance to thank her for the steamed buns. Third Granny Huang returned several "You're welcomes" my way, and then launched into a conversation. "Gentleman Song, I heard you intend to marry shopkeeper Feng's daughter. It's truly a good marriage. Miss Feng is a renowned beauty in our city, and she's able and virtuous. The 2 of you are a perfect match made in heaven." Baffled, I could not help but ask, "This matter was only briefly brought up to me. The rest is not true at all. Where did you hear these rumors?" Third Granny Huang sized me up and down. With a smile, she said, "The whole city knows of this. Don't tell me you have still yet to send betrothal gifts to Miss Feng." I promptly broke out into a cold sweat. "Betrothal gifts? I had only been in the city for a few days. What did I get this far?" "Well, I mean, once they hear you've been visiting the local brothel, I don't think her father's going to be super happy about that after just receiving a betrothal, discussion. So, I don't think you're going to have to worry about betrothal gifts for very much longer." After lunch, Tianshu obediently went to take his afternoon nap. I was just about to return to my chamber when I saw Hengwen carrying the fox from the small hall to his room. In his present form, carrying the fox must be quite strenuous. I walked over, and Hengwen looked up at me and smiled. "It looks quite pitiful sleeping alone in the small hall, so I'm taking it back to my room." I sighed and stroked a handful of furball's fluff. At least it'd be warm with it on the bed. Hengwen nodded and made a sound of acknowledgement, then gladly busied himself with carrying the fox into his room. Sorry, I'm going to turn that off right now. I apologize. I stood for a while outside his closed doors. After all, it was because I had saved Hengwen that Furball had ended up in this state. In any case, there was only a few days left. At least sleeping together would be some sort of comfort for it. When night descended, I was back in the ladies' bedchamber in Shu Yue Pavilion, listening to Qing Xian playing a tune. After a song, Qing Xian spoke softly and gently as she sat beside me, pouring me wine. The candle wick burned and crackled. Qing Xian pulled out a golden hairpin and picked at the charred snuff. Holding the cup, I looked at the light and could not help but sigh. Hearing the exhale, Qingxian slowly got up and moved over to sit by the stand that held her kin. She tuned the strings and played a mellow tune that held a bitter and lingering that was bitter and lingering, like a woe-begone young maiden in autumn. When the last of the lingering notes came to an end, Qingxian smiled at me and made her way back to where I was. She walked through the shadows cast by light. She turned aside, seemingly without realizing it, and lifted her sleeve as though wiping away tears. When she turned back, however, her face still wore the same smile. As she bent over to pour the wine, I looked at her and asked, "What has made this beauty before me so heart-stricken?" Qingxian immediately said with a smile, "Young master, you jest. I was merely blinded by the candle smoke when I passed under the lamp. On the contrary, it is the young master before me who is courting errant thoughts. For what reason could you be sighing the autumn away?" I said, "Never destined for each other, and yet meeting though it was never meant to be. High as the bright moon in the sky, within sight, but far beyond reach." Qingxian covered a mouth. "How melancholic and heartbreaking. I wonder which beautiful woman the young master is pining for with such anguish. I heard that young Master Song was still new to the city when love came knocking. You'll be marrying the young miss of the Feng household. How could you hold such forlorn yearnings?" No doubt the people in the city were all very well informed. "Miss Qingxian is a peerless beauty rivaled by none," I said. "All the romantic youths and the rich, distinguished patrons splurge fortunes just to spend a night with you. So why are you still shedding such sorrowful tears?" Qingxian lowered her head and sighed softly. "Young master, why tease this lowly one? I make a living by selling my smile and myself. Social status and standing, they are all merely make-believe. I'm just like the merchandise from the stall that belongs to whoever can afford to pay the price, regardless of who he is." I mean, she's not wrong, about the whole system of that, which is really sad. Her voice trembled a little at the end of her word. I know she's totally playing the manipulation game right now, but she's not wrong about her situation. Her voice trembled a little at the end of her words. Qingxian looked up and forced a smile at me. "My monetary lamentations have put a damper on your fun. Young master, please do not hold it against me. I'll play another tune for you." I let loose a long sigh. "If you are in any difficulty, just go ahead and voice it out. It's better than bottling it up. I may even be able to help you somewhere." Qingxian was inexpressive as she stared at me, biting her lips. Then all at once her face was all but obscured by her sleeves. 2 trails of tears streamed from behind her hands as she sobbed. "Young master, please let me play a tune for you. After these few days, I might no longer be able to. The nephew of Squire Zhang, who presides over this city, has already told the madam that he'd redeem my freedom. His uncle's 66th birthday is in a few days, and when the time comes, he will give me to Squire Zhang as a present. I... At this point, she dissolved into sobs. I'd be sobbing too at that, situation. Ew. I mean, I don't, there's nothing I can say about that. And my heart came alive with compassion. There were many things in the world one was powerless to do anything about. When all was said and done, there really was no distinction between heaven and the mortal realm. I stood by her side with a sigh and said in a gentle voice, "Don't cry. I'll help you think of a way." Trembling, Qingxian raised her head to look at me. Then she threw herself into my arms and bawled. When I left Shu Yue Pavilion, the front of my clothes were soaked in tears. The streets were already empty. Somehow, the small stall selling rouge was still open, and the young lad who watched it was sitting at the roadside with his hands in his sleeves, staring blankly at nothing. Presumably, he was waiting for passing Shu Yue Pavilion patrons to buy some boxes for the courtesans. Was there anything easy to do in this world? Not making a living, for sure. Once more, I returned to the small courtyard at midnight. After helping me wash up, the young servant yawned and went off to bed. Left alone under the lamplight, I did not feel sleepy. I looked at the 2 jars of wine on the table, took one, made my way to the yard, where I downed several mouthfuls. It was silent all around, and the cold wind was chilling to the bone. After tonight, I was one day down. I heard a voice behind me ask, "Why aren't you sleeping?" A look back revealed a tiny figure standing before me. To my surprise, it was Tianshu. I was confounded for a while before answering. "I couldn't sleep, so I came out to stretch my legs for a bit." Tianshu's clear, bright eyes flickered to my hands. I lowered my head and saw the wine jar. Letting out a dry laugh, I said, "Oh, this is fine wine in the mortal world. I fear I won't get to drink it after returning to the heavenly court, so I wanted to drink more while I can." Tianshu looked quietly at me, apparently taking my word for it. I set the wine jar down by the rookery, and then removed my outer robe to wrap around him. "The wind is freezing. You should go back to your room as soon as possible and sleep." Have I been injured recently?" Tianshu suddenly asked. I gave a start. Was Tianshu about to recover? Without thinking, I blurted, "You are now in the mortal world, so this is just a momentary discomfort. Once you return to the heavenly court a few days later, it will all come back to you." Tianshu made a sweet-tempered sound of acknowledgement and returned to his chamber to sleep. Before he left, he looked at me again. "You should rest early, too." I watched his retreating back. These few days, I never saw little Tianshu without Hengwen at his side. I'd sensed nothing different. But the sight of him and him alone tonight and his retreating figure, I somehow felt a sense of déjà vu. It was as if I'd seen this figure many years before. Perhaps it was because he still bore many similarities with the grown-up Tianshu, and that was what gave me a sense of familiarity. How sad is that? You're familiar with his back walking away from you. I know. I scooped up the wine jar again and downed mouthful after mouthful until it was empty. It was still quiet all around, and the night breeze still as chilly as ever. I treaded lightly to Hengwen's chamber and ducked in. As expected, the fox was sleeping under Hengwen's quilt. Sensing my entry, it immediately burrowed out and leaped to the ground. With a flick of my fingers, I put it to sleep and placed it on a chair. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at Hengwen's sleeping face, wondering how many more days I still had left to look at him like this. I tucked him in. Touching his face gently, I could not help but whisper, "Hengwen, please recover your original form before I am sent to the immortal execution terrace, even if it's only for one day or even one night." I put the fox back in its place, tucked the quilt tightly around Hengwen, and left. $5 he's not asleep. I returned to my chamber, where a lone lamp flickered in the infinite stretch of silence. I fanned out the lights and went to bed. I overslept and woke only when the sun was high in the sky. The young servant told me that the young masters had gone ahead and taken their breakfasts, and were now both in the yard. I acknowledged his words, and hurriedly finished my own meal before strolling over to join them. Hengwen was rolling dice with a company of youths, and they seemed to be playing for keeps with copper coins at stake. Hengwen had already won a pile that lay before him, and the group looked disgruntled at their loss. Tianshu, on the other hand, was sitting at the stone table, which had been set with a brush, inkstone, and paper. His head was bent as he wrote something. I went over for a look. Spread out before Tianshu was a book, and beside it was a stack of paper choked with densely written characters. It looked as if he was copying it. I picked up a piece of paper for a look. The Analects of Confucius? Oh, thank you for the hearts. This looks like homework the teacher assigned, I blurted in astonishment. Tianshu raised his face a little and nodded. Uh-huh. I don't know how to play dice, and I lost earlier. They said they don't want my money, but that they asked me to help them with their private school homework. Their teacher fell sick a few days ago and paused classes. Once lessons resume the day after tomorrow, they'll have to hand it in, and they can only play with us after their homework is done. I don't want your money, I want your work. So you just copied everything, I thought? These children really took their teacher for a fool. None of them would get off lightly once they handed in a stack of homework in only one person's handwriting. I mean, he's not wrong. Seized by impulse, I picked up the stack of paper and flipped through, only to be thunderstruck by what I saw. Of these papers, some were written with skewed and crooked strokes, some were scrawled with a flourish, some were dainty and compacted. They were not written in a single person's handwriting. I looked again at the piece Tianshu was in the midst of completing. It was in yet another kind of handwriting that was squarish and upright, with distinctive edges and corners. These are all written by you? I wondered in astonishment. Tianshu stayed his brush and nodded. Yeah, I had each of them write a few words for me, but I don't know if my imitation is spot on. Having said that, he lifted his brush and resumed writing. That's impressive. The page was filled up in no time. Tianshu set down his brush and handed the paper to me so I could add it to the stack. Taking it, I was struck by this inexplicable sense of familiarity again, as if this scene too had occurred before. Perhaps it resembled the sight of Tianshu inscribing books and paintings back in the heavenly court? Perhaps, in response to this immortal lord's visibly losing himself in thoughts, Tianshu looked at me questioningly. I replaced the paper in the stack and strolled away. Seeing me linger at Tianshu's table probably pricked the consciences of Hengwen's company of youths. As they played, they snuck timid glances at me. Hengwen tossed his newly earned wealth onto the ever-growing pile before him and said, "Don't be afraid. You won't tell your teacher." The youth's eyes swiveled towards me, and I said with an affable smile, "I won't tell on you." The youths were promptly delighted, as if they had been granted an amnesty, and shouted, "Thank you, uncle!" sweetly, like their mouths were coated with honey. Those few shouts of "uncle," however, really invoked a melody of feelings in this immortal lord's heart. After several rounds of continued losses, their faces turned a ghastly shade of green. The pile of copper coins before Hengwen became a considerable heap that must have contained the entirety of the boy's snack savings. One of the boys lowered both his head and the dice. "I'm not playing anymore." Hengwen stretched lazily. "Is that so? Then let's call it quits." He picked up the dice and returned them to the boys, then pushed forth the copper coins before him and grinned. "Take your money back quickly. Careful not to get shortchanged." The youths were all momentarily stunned. Surprisingly enough, they had enough integrity left to remain standing in place. One of them flushed red and stammered, "He who concedes defeat when he loses a bet is a real man. Since we've lost to you, then that is how it is." Hengwen smiled. It wasn't stated that we would be betting money when we played. We were merely counting copper coins to keep score. These copper coins were always meant to be returned. Since you want to talk about winning and losing, how about this? If I win again after I join the school, all of you will help me copy my homework. Okay? The youths blinked and nodded, then immediately swarmed over in delight to return their coins to their pouches. But once they were done, they dawdled, unwilling to leave. Want to play something else? One of them hemmed and hawed. Eh? Didn't you say earlier that you weren't going to play anymore? Hengwen asked. The youth said with a cough, I was talking about dice. How about a game of chess? Hengwen nodded. All right. So he set up the chess game and slaughtered them all again. Yeah, because he's thousands of years old and has been playing chess. I simply returned to the covered walkway and set up a chair to watch the show from afar. My goodness, this is a long chapter. The youths played until lunchtime before reluctantly leaving. Oh, wait, I skipped a paragraph. In the days of my own childhood, I would skip out on homework and play the day away with my classmates or cousins. Frequently, I had received my fair share of the rod from my old man. It was all very fascinating to think back on after all these years. The youths played until lunchtime before reluctantly leaving their completed homework in hand. The young servant said to me, Master, the food is ready in the kitchen. Would you like to have it now? I nodded. Serve the lunch. Hengwen ate quite a lot, especially the fried eggplant. I made to rearrange the dishes and move the plate closer to him, but Hengwen held it down with his chopsticks and said, No need for that. I can reach it. Or you can also pick some out for me. So I picked up some food from the dish and delivered it to his plate. He uttered his thanks. I think that even now, Hengwen has a bit of a baby crush on Song Yao. Tianshu, on the other hand, ate less than he had previous days. In fact, he had eaten less than half of his rice. Eat a little more, I urged in a kindly tone. You haven't tried these stir-fried bamboo shoots from the kitchen. Try them. Tianshu picked up his chopsticks and sampled some dishes. To my surprise, he eventually finished his bowl of rice and even drank half a bowl of soup. I was delighted. After the meal, a maidservant came forth to clean up the table. I knew Hengwen was thinking about feeding the fox, so I bade her bring the scrambled eggs over. Hengwen said, I told the kitchen to replace it with stewed chicken chunks. It should be tired of eggs after being fed the same thing for the past few days, so there'll be a change of taste today. Patted him on the head. Then a change of taste it is, I said. The stewed chicken chunks came in a large bowl, soup and all. Worried that Hengwen might lose his grip on the bowl and scald himself, I personally helped him carry it to his room. The fox was lying in the chair, squinting as it waited for Hengwen. I set down the soup bowl. Once it's done eating, you should rest for a while too. Got it, Hengwen answered. I returned to my chamber and made my plans to visit Shu Yue Pavilion this afternoon. As I did, I gave in to temptation, taking out Xing Xian's handkerchief and scented sachet again. A gust of wind blew through the door I had forgotten to close earlier. I looked up in time to see Hengwen striding into the hall, his eyes on the objects in my hand. I hurriedly set them down. Why aren't you resting? I thought I'd come over for a look. I'll go back for my nap later. Hengwen walked over to the bed and picked up the scented sachet to heft it in his hand. How fragrant. I took it from his hand. You should go back and sleep. Hengwen looked at me with a smile. Are you going to see her again this afternoon? I had the self-awareness to know that it was not appropriate to mention this sort of stuff before young Hengwen, so I gave an ambiguous answer. I have some urgent matters to attend to. Hengwen gave an oh before following up with yawn. Then you should take a nap. I'm sleepy, so I'll head back for one myself. Having said that, he turned and left. I followed him to the door and watched his retreating back. His door closed with a creak, and only then did I close my own with a sigh. Called him on his shit. All right. Chapter 21. When evening came around, I arrived at Shu Yue Pavilion once more. Except this time, I did not head for Xing Xian's room. I had made a written pact with the procuress yesterday. Seeing as that squire's nephew still had yet to discuss Xing Xian's price with the procuress, I had beaten him to the punch, telling her that I wanted to redeem Xing Xian's freedom. The procuress had put on a show of hesitating, loath to part with her top earner, and thrown out an exorbitant price. Cooperated by playing the role of a cuckold liberal with his money and gave a candid, ready nod of my head. The procuress was thrilled. I mean, he can't take the gold with him back to heaven. I mean, he could, but, he also thinks he's about to die, so he's a little more free with that money. I set the banknotes before her, earning a beam even more radiant than the flowers in spring. Thank you, my lord. From today onward, Xing Xian is all yours. The ladies from Shu Yue Pavilion crowded around Xing Xian as she walked out. With tears glistening in her eyes, she curtsied deeply to me. At least it could be said that this immortal lord had done a good deed during these few days in the mortal world. The procuress even went to the special effort of sending a small pink sedan to send Xing Xian off. And so it was in full view of the common folk of the city that the immortal lord led Xing Xian's tiny sedan to my humble compound under the darkness of the night. Yeah, he's not getting that betrothal. I have a feeling he's about to get a very stern talking to tomorrow. Xing Xian dismounted the sedan and entered the courtyard at the side of this immortal. In the courtyard, the maidservants, young servant, and cook all stood still like wooden stakes, and the copper basin in the young servant's hands hit the ground with a noisy clatter. Xing Xian stood beside me, looking like a crab apple blossom adorned with dewdrops as she timidly lowered her head. I saw Hengwen and Tianshu walk from the doors of the main hall to the covered walkway, where they repeatedly sized the pair of us up. Said to the crowd, Miss Xing Xian will be temporarily living in the courtyard, so please tidy up a guest room. The maidservants, young servant, and cook were all very quick-witted. The young servant picked up the copper basin and immediately answered, Sure, this humble one will go right away. One of the maidservants came to support Xing Xian by the arm. Miss, please take a rest first in the hall. The other maidservant said to Hengwen and Tianshu, It's getting late. Young masters, let this lowly one attend to the two of you while you rest. Hengwen and Tianshu then returned to their rooms with her. The maidservant helped Xing Xian into the small hall, served tea, of which Xing Xian sipped a cup, and announced that the hot water was ready, escorting her to the bath. I instructed the maidservants to serve her well, then strode over to the side chambers. After a moment of hesitation, I pushed open the door to Tianshu's chamber. Tianshu was reading a book under the light, but seeing me enter, he set it down. Not going to bed yet? You should rest early, I said. Tianshu uttered an acknowledgement and asked, That Xing Xian. She was being forced into marriage by a wealthy family, I explained. I took pity on her and redeemed her freedom before they could. Tomorrow I'll ask her if she still has any relatives she can rely on. In all likelihood, we will have to return to the heavenly court in the next few days, so settling her down before returning would be considered a meritorious deed during my trip to the mortal world. Tianshu nodded his head, albeit with a puzzled expression, then closed his book and obediently went to bed. I went to Hengwen's room next. Hengwen was sitting on the bed, unwrapping Furball's bandage. I moved in for a look. These few days, I had been using my powers to treat its wounds. Hengwen had cast a tiny spell too, and now Furball was completely healed. All that remained were bald spots where the fur had yet to grow back. It's getting more and more spirited these days, I commented. Yes, Hengwen responded with a smile. Its injuries have healed. He reached out to stroke the fox's back, and the fox smacked its lips and licked Hengwen's other hand. I moved Furball aside and took his place on the edge of the bed. It's getting late. Sleep early. Hengwen yawned. Now that you mention it, I'm really a little sleepy. Oh, all I gotta do is say the word sleepy and I yawn. All I had to say was, then sleep. I'll take my leave. Hengwen smiled. All right. I left Hengwen's room and pushed open the door to my own. Wearing a sheer gown as flimsy as the wings of cicadas, Xingxian sat under the lamp, looking at me with eyes that were bashful, sultry, and enamored all at once. I gave a genteel smile as I stood outside the door. Please take a good rest first, Miss Xingxian. If there's anything you feel unaccustomed to, feel free to let me know tomorrow. I turned to leave when Xingxian said quietly behind me, Young master, since you have already redeemed me, I'm yours from today onward. Or do you disdain me for being an unchaste woman past her prime, unworthy of such a virtuous gentleman? I had no choice but to turn back to her. How can you say that, Miss Xingxian? I was merely lending a helping hand by redeeming your freedom. The act in itself is nothing worthy of mention. There is no need for you to beholden yourself to me. You can stay in my humble abode for a couple of days. If you still have any kin or sweetheart whom you can rely on, don't hesitate to tell me. I'll make the arrangements for you. Not a single thought seemed to cross Xingxian's face, but soon enough she had covered it with a sob. In saying this, are you turning me away? Young master, do you know that when you passed by the building that day, I was taken with your graceful charm? That was why I so boldly used my handkerchief to play matchmaker, hoping to get to know you. I was so delighted when you redeemed my freedom, thinking that heaven had finally opened its eyes to my plight, and Buddha had finally blessed me, but who knew that this young master, you would say such words to me? I heaved a long sigh. Miss Xingxian, it's not like you don't know that my heart is already spoken for, but I'm doomed to a fate of eternal solitude with no hope ever of marriage. Wipe your tears and sleep well. I'll figure a way out for you again tomorrow. Hey, gosh. Sorry about that. Ugh. I closed the door behind me before I walked to the yard. Once more, I had nowhere to sleep, and sitting on the roof tiles was chilly, the night breeze growing increasingly colder. I remembered that there was another hard couch in the study, so I snuck in, recited a spell to transform it into a large, soft bed. Bolting the door, I turned in. I had indeed invited a thorny trouble upon myself by bringing Xingxian back. I had 2 tagalongs in tow, and yet she had still fallen for me at first sight. Apparently, there was no burying this immortal lord's charm. Charm. I closed my eyes and was about to fall asleep when a plaintive tune rung out from afar. It drifted past the crack of the door and buried its way into my ears. Seeing that Xingxian had hit a roadblock with this mortal lord earlier, she had taken out her bamboo flute to play a tune or two to distract herself. The song was mournful and heart-wrenching. I fell asleep to it. The next day, all the servants in the courtyard looked listless, their eyes glazed over as they yawned repeatedly. I pretended not to have noticed a thing. Xingxian, meanwhile, had shut herself in her room, and I paid her no mind. Hengwen and Tianshu could not refrain from letting loose a couple of yawns themselves over breakfast. To me, Tianshu said, "That one from yesterday." "You can call her Miss Xingxian," I said with a cough. "All right," Tianshu acquiesced. "Why isn't Miss Xingxian coming for breakfast?" "She probably hasn't gotten up yet," I hazarded. "I'll get someone to deliver breakfast to her later." That is so ambiguous right there. Like, you make it sound like she has a reason to be tired, which she probably does because she was probably playing tunes into the early morning. But, like, still, audience. Tianshu nodded, and the maidservant serving the dishes lowered her head, hiding a smile behind her sleeve. "My point!" In the afternoon, the cook looked at me and said, "Master, it's not our prerogative to speak out of turn when it comes to your affairs, but isn't it a little inappropriate to get the young two masters to call the madam Miss Xingxian? After all, there is the hierarchy to consider here. Even if she's only the master's bed warmer, it's still..." I wanted to explain the situation at first, but the affairs between men and women were hard to explain, much less in clear-cut terms. So I simply said, "Miss Xingxian is merely staying here for a day or two. All of you should also address her as Miss Xingxian. Just treat her courteously and according to the protocols for a guest." The cook stole a glance at me, acknowledged my instruction, and left. I went to Xingxian's room and asked if she still had any kin she could turn to. Xingxian bit her lip and kept her head lowered without saying a word. After a long time, she said, "Young master, I'm aware that you want to marry young Miss Feng. My presence here will only make it awkward. I'm already yours, so I have no complaints whether you send me off to the countryside or resell me to another." I spoke to her for a long length of time without further progress, so I could only leave. Xingxian took out her kin again and sat in her room playing and singing several forlorn tunes. I mean, he's trying to help you, lady. And I get it. It's part of the time period. But, like, also, he is literally saying, like, you're free. Be free. Which is probably terrifying to her, because she hasn't really had choices recently. Which, I mean, is double-sided coin and sword right there. But yeah. She sang until the cook, maidservant, and young servant all fled far away to the backyard, while Hengwen and Tianshu's playmates came for less than a quarter of an hour before they scattered. I looked on helplessly as a very bored Hengwen carried the fox out from his chamber. The fox sneezed and its ears trembled. With eyes tightly shut, it buried its head deep into Hengwen's bosom. It all looked very unbecoming to me. The fox was still a demon, after all. It was improper for it to keep sticking to Hengwen, even if Hengwen appeared to be an adolescent. I said to Hengwen, "If nothing else, put it aside and let it sleep. Isn't it a tad heavy to keep hugging it all the time?" "Then I'll take it back to the room," Hengwen said, and turned back inside. As I lingered under the eaves of the roof, the cook and young servant intercepted me. The young servant bowed and grimaced at me. "Master, Aren't you going to comfort Miss Xian? I said to let her have a quiet moment for the time being, and strolled onward. The cook hurriedly strode a step forward and bowed. Master, please don't hold it against us servants for speaking out of turn. Ever since last night, Miss Qingxian's tunes have evoked such heartache in us. Master, you should go and comfort her. I sighed in despondency. I have, in fact, come back from comforting her in the late morning, but it was futile. Since she wants to play, then just let her play. The cook and the young servant had then left, looking rather distressed. I wonder what song exactly she's playing that it's like this distressing. Like, oh my goodness. Qingxian took a break during lunch, but in the afternoon, when Madame Lu Hu came calling again, she was greeted by Qingxian's sorrowful tune. After she sat down and exchanged some pleasantries, she got to the point. Young Master Song, this old one is merely here to pass a message. I hope you don't mind. About the matter this old one spoke to you about last time, I ask that you please just pretend that I have never mentioned it. Called it! I promptly understood that this was because of Xingxian. It was just as well for me, so I said, Thank you for passing on the message. May I trouble you to convey another message to them? This humble one understands. It's indeed regrettable, and I'll definitely not bring this up again. But Madame Lu Hu changed her tone and said, Actually, it's not that this old one is speaking out of turn, but you pulled such a stunt just when a marriage was about to be realized. The Fangs find it all very humiliating. They feared that a distinguished person like you did not think much of the young miss of their household, making it seem like they were the ones who had tried to force this young miss onto you. They kind of were. If you send away this courtesan from the brothel, it would not be impossible to turn things around. I could not be bothered to expend more energy on this matter, so I gave a perfunctory answer. It is as you say. This humble one will definitely consider your advice carefully. Let's talk about it again in a few days. Which, at any rate, successfully fobbed off Madame Lu Hu. I'm sorry, with the name Lu Hu, I can't help but thinking like, yoo-hoo! Like, Lu Hu! I was just about to return to my room for a drink of water, but Xingxian was waiting at my door, asking to see me. On entering my room, her first words were, I heard Madame Lu came over in the afternoon. It seems she's here to talk about your marriage. Young master, there's no need to take me into consideration. If you wish to send me away, then... I sighed. Covering her mouth with her handkerchief, Xingxian sobbed. But I only love and admire you, young master. Just one day, or even one night, let Xingxian serve you once. However you want to deal with me afterward, I took her in, thinking that she was merely one love-struck woman in this wide world. I never expected that I would have someone be so besotted with me before I was sent to the immortal execution terrace. Even this bit about my fate of eternal solitude was disproved. I had indeed gained plenty. I reached out to help her up. In a gentle voice, I said, I'm not marrying young Miss Fang. As for you, I'll definitely make the proper arrangements too. Get up first and return to your room. Qingxian wiped her tears, rose to her feet, and curtsied, then did as I asked. I was exhausted, having been tormented in turn like a pinwheel. Could not even stop myself from yawning during dinner. So impolite. Initially, I hoped that meant I could get a good night's sleep at night. Then during the second night watch period, a tune started to waft through the air and linger, sounding like the forlorn cries of the cuckoo and the mournful wails of a widow at her husband's grave. There was even a quiver trailing through each note, so much that even I quavered along with it. But as I pricked up my ears to listen, it occurred to me that this sound did not originate from Xingxian's room, but from the backyard. So I rolled over and lifted my concealed form from my physical body, floating out of the study to investigate. However, the sound of the flute came to an abrupt stop. Under the veil of darkness, a shadowy figure streaked across the moon gate in the backyard. I followed it into the backyard, only to see a figure leap off the courtyard wall. Under the starlight by the flower clusters, this figure traded gazes with the silhouette of another person here. The other person had a delicate and lithe figure, Xingxian. As for the other person who had leaped off the courtyard wall, I supposed he was the fellow who had played the flute. Somehow, however, this visitor's form seemed familiar. I bet it's the rouge seller. Because he was staying outside the shop all day and all night. Which has a good big old window looking up at her. I suppose he was the fellow who had played the flute. Somehow, however, this visitor's form seemed familiar. I stood beside them. The flute player was grasping Xingxian's hands as he said in an urgent voice, "Xingxian, leave with me. Let's elope somewhere far away." "Leave?" Xingxian said wistfully. "Where can we go? Why are you here for me again?" The flute player had only just said a word when a voice suddenly interrupted from the top of the wall. "That's right, Xingxian. Where are you going to take her?" The flute player and Xingxian both gave a start and whipped their heads up. A figure standing atop the courtyard wall leaped lightly off the wall, walked over to the flute player, and asked again, "Xingxian, where are you going to take her?" Ooh, love triangle. That person was dressed in men's attire, but had a sweet, delicate voice and a slender, graceful figure. It was a young girl. All of a sudden, the script from The Meeting Between Butterfly Lovers turned into Two Damsels Meet a Hero. I stood to the side again and watched as the flustered flute player stammered, "Young Miss Yu Ying, why are you—" "Jing Xuan, you should leave now," Xingxian said softly. "Young Miss Yu Ying, don't worry. Jing Xuan will never come looking for me again. Young Master Song has already bought me, and he said himself that he would not propose marriage to your parents. Young Miss Yu Yang, you can marry Jing Xuan with peace of mind. Young Master Song redeemed me from a courtesan's life, so I will repay him for all my life. Jing Xuan, I wish you and Miss Yu Yang a lifetime of conjugal bliss." She turned to leave. The flute player grabbed her sleeve, stopping her. "Xingxian, did you deceive that Song man into redeeming you just to bring young Miss Yu Ying and me together? How could you be so foolish? All this time my heart only has Xingxian." Young Miss Yu Yang cut him off coldly and took another step towards the flute player. Well, well. Jing Xuan, you finally speak the truth today." With a bitter laugh, she continued, "That's right. I should have known that you only had eyes for Xingxian. I should have known the moment you cast aside your dignity as a scholar who'd passed the county imperial examination to sell Rouge. I was right! He is the Rouge seller at the foot of the brothel. Sorry, that was probably really loud in the microphone. I just got really excited. At the foot of the brothel. It was just that when we were children, you said you would marry me as your bride, and like a fool, I took it seriously, unwilling to believe that you would end up falling for someone else. She threw an object onto the ground and turned back towards the wall. Seriously, sorry about that clap. Like, I was not thinking about it, and that probably hurt your ears. So it turned out that the flute player was the young lad selling rouge on the ground floor of Shu Yue Pavilion. No wonder I found the sight of him familiar. Yu Yang walked up to the wall, then turned around and continued. Miss Qing Xian, for Jing Xuan's sake, you even used yourself to hold back that song person, so that he could not propose marriage to my parents. You really are foolish. When my parents forced me to marry him, I told them I'd rather die. If they force me into a corner, at most I'll just leave and end this once and for all. You never asked Jing Xuan who he liked, and went straight to sacrificing yourself. Didn't you know how it would hurt him? This immortal lord realized that this courtyard wall of mine was indeed really low. Did not take young Miss Feng Yu Ying much effort at all to climb her way up and jump away. Meanwhile, Qing Xian and He Jing Xuan were still gazing at each other. Qing Xian, He Jing Xuan pleaded, "Leave with me." Jing Xian shook her head. It's too late. I've deceived young Master Song. He has money, so he must have power and influence too. If I leave with you, I will only be putting you in harm's way. Xuan Long, leave without me. Dude, he has literally been saying, like, you got family, you got a lover, like, you can go, it's okay. Oh my goodness, this girl. I floated over to the moon gate, manifested myself, and coughed. He Jing Xuan was right in the midst of tightly grasping Qing Xian's hands. When this pair of star-crossed lovebirds heard my cough, they immediately began trembling like falling leaves in the wind. Don't be afraid, I said with an affable smile. I've seen it all from where I was in the shadows earlier. Fished out a piece of paper from my hand and tore it into pieces. To Qing Xian, I said, that was your indenture. Qing Xian looked steadily at me and suddenly fell to her knees with He Jing Xuan. The love between both of you is so earth-shatteringly touching that even a layman like me is deeply moved, I said in all sincerity. I may not be a virtuous gentleman, but I'm willing to grant you your wish to be together. He Jing Xuan, take Miss Qing Xian away. In the middle of the night, when the wind was cold, I stood in the open and spacious backyard and let out a laugh. So this was this immortal lord's fate after all. I thought I had picked up 2 romances before being sent to the immortal execution terrace, but it turned out I was still a go-between for other couples. Behind me, a voice said at leisure, So, how does your recent spate of romantic luck with the ladies feel? Chapter 22. I looked back and saw him standing close by. He smiled at me. It felt as if my heart was lifted, and for a moment I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I could not control my legs as I hurried over to him. Even my voice trembled when I spoke. He simply stood there, smiling as he listened. Hengwen! I grabbed hold of his sleeve. I've been longing for this for so long, and now that it was right before my eyes, I suspected it to all be a dream. He moved in closer to me and whispered into my ears. Actually, that night when you told me to recover soon, I somehow really did. But then I saw you basking in the love of those peach blossom women, so I wanted to see how your luck would play out this time. Feigned a sigh. Looks like there's something to what you've been moping about all this time. Your luck in love truly leaves much to be desired. I just looked at him, at a loss for words. It's late and the wind is cold, Hengwen said. It wouldn't be good if someone saw us standing in the yard like this. Let's return to the chamber first. Embarrassed, I released his sleeve. Oh, all right. As we re-entered the covered walkway, Hengwen chuckled. You've been sleeping in the study these 2 days. Can I enter, though? I let out an awkward laugh and pushed the door to the study open. The room was tiny. I had had someone replace the hard couch with a large bed, leaving only a small gap of free space on all sides. The moonlight just so happened to shine on the table the moment I opened the door. I closed it behind us, and Hengwen erected a magical barrier around us with a wave of his sleeve. You've just recovered, I said, so best not to use your divine powers for now. What if... It's fine, Hengwen said. Didn't I already use them these past few days? I could not help myself, reaching out again to grasp his sleeve. Still, it's better to use less of it. Hengwen stood looking at me. He had already recovered. These few days in the mortal world would finally come to an end. No matter which, there would eventually come a day when it all ended. It's a weird way to put it. I grasped Hengwen by both arms and called him by his name. Before he could react, I kissed him on the lips. This immortal lord really did admire himself so. How wise was I to have had someone carry in a large bed this morning. The peach blossom wood had been an illusion conjured by Hengwen's divine powers. It had always been unreal, dreamlike, and nothing like the vivid realism I was living now. The tips of Hengwen's brows had furrowed into a frown. I'm gentler than I was last time, I whispered into his ear, voice hoarse. Hengwen opened partially closed eyes, and when he looked at me, there seemed to be a smile on them. Then he bit my neck hard. Have at it to your heart's content. Next time, I won't let you get your way. As the harshness of winter neared, drawing well water and warming it in the tub became a more taxing task. The original intention was to wash Hengwen and myself clean, but in the end we washed until we ended up in bed. So we changed the water again, heated it up again, and washed up again. Rinse and repeat. By the time this immortal lord was all refreshed and content and taking a nap for real with Hengwen in my arms, it was almost dawn. No wonder the mortals love to lament over the brevity of conjugal nights, Hengwen remarked lazily. Only tonight do I understand. Then he closed his eyes and drifted into a sound sleep. I closed my eyes, more than ready for a short rest, but then I had another dream. In my dream, I was sitting under the lamp in a room, a game of chess laid out before me. The world before my eyes seemed to be shrouded in a veil of fog. I could not see the game clearly, or my opponent, for that matter, but I knew viscerally that I had lost. I've lost again, I blurted out. Will I ever get to beat you once this lifetime? The snuff of the candlewick crackled, although the first light of dawn was already sneaking through the window paper. The person opposite me waved a hand to extinguish the lamp. He then pushed open the window panel. The morning rays poured across the room. In a blink of an eye, however, I was standing in a courtyard. It was so foggy I had difficulty seeing, but I seemed to be well acquainted with everything in the courtyard. Ahead of me should be a pond where the water lilies had just grown round leaves. At the edge of the bank were a few pieces of decorative taihu rocks and 2 plantain trees, as well as a pavilion on the opposite bank. In it sat a stone table with a chessboard carved into it. It should be spring at this time. The fragrance of Lady Bank's roses in the morning mist was mentally refreshing. No doubt the vines of climbing Lady Bank's rose branches on the courtyard walls were in full bloom. He stood right beside me. Beside me was that same window from earlier. Perfect is the spring breeze when the morning dew thins, I said to him. I still could not see his face clearly, but I knew he was smiling with pleasure. The flowers were fragrant, oh my goodness, the morning breeze cool and refreshing. The fog, however, was thickening. I anxiously looked at his face, wanting to know who he was, but his entire figure was concealed in the fog, invisible and indiscernible. I reached out, wanting to grab hold of him to ask, but the moment my fingers grasped the corner of the slightly cool fabric, I jolted awake. I was clutching Hengwen's sleeve, and Hengwen was leaning against the headboard, his head tilted aside as he looked at me. I hurriedly propped myself up. You should sleep a little longer. Lie back down. It's not like I'm immortal, Hengwen said lazily. I'm not that weak. My fatigue's almost gone after a good sleep. This immortal lord immediately followed up with a question. Where did you learn that mortals are weak? From the books, Hengwen yawned. When it comes to that sort of book, those with just illustrations are not as good as those with both illustrations and accompanying texts. Hengwen, just how much erotica has he read? Hengwen looked down. What's wrong with your left hand? It doesn't seem to be very mobile. I was in the midst of rubbing my little finger. Maybe I hurt it some time ago. It feels a little out of sorts. Since early morning, I'd been feeling stabbing pain at the base of my finger, like it was being stabbed by a knife. Hengwen raised my hand for a look. All of a sudden, he said, I'm going to head back first to the Heavenly Court. He laughed at my expression. Don't panic. I'm not going back to plead guilty. I just think many reasons for your trip down this time are extremely contrived. There's something fishy about this matter, too. I'm thinking about going to the Jade Emperor to clear up all these doubts. As for the confession of guilt, the tips of his hair brushed gently against my shoulder. We'll go together. I could never stop Hengwen if he wanted to return to heaven, so I said, all right then. Following his lead, I draped my clothes around myself and got out of bed. But Tianshu, I think he's still a child unless he's been pretending to, but I don't see why he would. Following his lead, I draped my clothes around myself and got out of bed. I smoothed the front flaps of his clothes for him, and as Hengwen walked to the door, he turned aside and asked, Song Yao, who do you think would set up love trials for us the way you did for Tianshu and Nanming? With a dry laugh, I answered, I haven't really thought about that. Hengwen smiled, then turned around in the morning rays. With a flick of his sleeves, he transformed into a beam of light to depart. For a moment, I stood blankly in that empty chamber. Then, with a sigh, I reached into my sleeves. I spread a sheet of paper on the table, preparing a brush that I could write with without ink. In the end, I folded up my work, a sheet chock full of writing, and recited an incantation. That piece of paper instantaneously transformed into golden light and vanished without a trace. When I had initially descended to the mortal world, the Jade Emperor had bestowed this upon me in secret. It was called a submission memorial. No matter where I was, this memorial could make its way to the Jade Emperor's desk in an instant. I stepped out of the study, rubbing my temples. Hengwen knew nothing of the ways of the mortal world. Thus, he still acted without consideration for the consequences. This morning, the courtyard was missing Qingxian and a little young master. How was this immortal lord going to explain their disappearance to the servants and little Tianshu? No matter how fast Hengwen was, he would definitely not be as fast as that memorial. In that memorial, I told the Jade Emperor that the offending immortal Song Yao had failed the Jade Emperor's decree by secretly communicating information to Tianshu Qingjun. On top of that, I had been swayed by secular love. Knowing there was no excuse for this unpardonable sin, I pled guilty of my own accord. With the memorial submitted, this immortal lord's tragedy of fate was sealed. I would definitely not escape punishment for my intervention in Tianshu's trials, and since I was already going to be sent to the immortal execution terrace, why drag Hengwen along with me? The precedent of Tianshu and Nanming was right before my eyes. So, I thought, even if I were to be banished to the mortal world again, it was still better for Hengwen to remain in the heavenly court than for the both of us to be exiled. I'm not really surprised he did that. Let's be real. I don't think any of you are really surprised that he did that either. I made my way to the covered walkway and came face to face with a maidservant who greeted me with a curtsy. I was wondering if I should buy time by telling her that Miss Qingxian and the little young master were still asleep and not to be disturbed when the young servant suddenly ran over in a fluster. Master, the main hall. In the main hall. You should go and take a look. Quickly. This immortal lord strode swiftly into the main hall, where a man and a woman in the center of the hall fell to their knees on seeing me. Why had Qingxian and the flute player returned? They remained on the ground, crying their hearts out to me. With Qingxian's dainty hand in his, the flute player cried, Young Master Song, you're this Junior and Qing'er's great benefactor. After this Junior and Qing'er are married, we will erect a longevity tablet to honor you in our home and offer incense every day. The pair cried in tandem. But why in the world had these two not let their tears run their course in the backyard yesterday instead of making a special trip here to cry again? Resigned, I bent over and helped them up. I really do not deserve this honor. The unity of a pair of lovers in marriage is the most fulfilling of all in the world. The slowly one is merely acting in accordance with heaven's wishes. Oh my gosh, my nose just was suddenly so itchy. Oh my gosh. Sorry. After seeing Qingxian and the flute player off, I returned to the main hall to see little Tianshu standing by the screen. Tianshu looked at me with bright, shiny eyes. Why did Qingxian and that man cry like that just now? Is this the love of mortals? I ruffled his hair and took my seat. That's right. Isn't love something that makes mortals happy? Tianshu asked. In that case, they should be smiling. Why do they cry? When you get involved in something like this, there will be plenty of tears and smiles, I said. Tianshu uttered an, oh. I told the main servants not to call up the little young master yet, on account of him being a sleepyhead today. I would hold them off for as long as it took. After breakfast, Tianshu asked me in a hushed tone, Where's Hengwen? He went back to the heavenly court first, I answered truthfully. Tianshu creased his forehead in a frown. I was just about to explain in detail when a bright light suddenly lit up the interior of the chamber. Bai Yue Daijun materialized in midair, leading 5 or 6 heavenly soldiers. In a clear, loud voice, he announced, Song Yao Yuanju, I am here on the Jade Emperor's decree to lead you and Tianshu Qingjun back to the heavenly court post-haste. Tianshu had yet to recover. Confused, he reached out to tightly clutch the front of this immortal lord's clothes. Bai Yue Daijun alighted on the ground and said politely, Song Yuanju, this way, please. The 5 or 6 heavenly soldiers moved towards Tianshu, but this immortal lord took a step to stand before him. Daijun, if you would be so kind as to allow Tianshu Qingjun to remain by my side for the time being. Bai Yue Daijun looked at Tianshu. That's fine. With a signal from his eyes, the heavenly soldiers withdrew and passed through the wall to look around. After a moment, they returned. One of them was carrying the fox in his hands. He said to Bai Yue, to report to your eminence, we sent those mortals off into their dreams. When they wake up, they will just assume this household has already moved away. Bai Yue Daijun gave a slight nod of his head. Let's go. The scenery in the heavenly court was the same as ever, as were the rose-tinted clouds and the few faces guarding the southern heavenly gate. Yun, the Jade Emperor's heavenly envoy, stood before the southern heavenly gate and bowed to Bai Yue Daijun. This humble immortal has waited here for a long time on the Jade Emperor's decree. Has Daijun brought back the person the Jade Emperor instructed you to retrieve? Little Tianshu stood by my side, while the heavenly soldier holding the fox stood on the other. May I trouble the heavenly envoy He to report back to the Jade Emperor that I've brought them back with no issue? Bai Yue Daijun said. Yun looked in my direction and nodded. This humble immortal understands. Then he added, the Jade Emperor has sent instructions that Daijun send Tianshu Qingjun to Yao Guang Palace. Having received the order, Bai Yue Daijun turned to Tianshu. Please come with me, he said, though he seemed deeply reluctant to do so. Little Tianshu did not understand what was happening, but he asked in a clear, childlike voice, Fine. In that case, I shall have to trouble Daijun. He stepped forward beside me, then turned his head back again to ask. Oh, right. Where do you live in the heavenly court? You've been looking after me these days in the mortal realm. I will call on you again another day to convey my thanks. I forced a smile. I live in the Guangshu Manor. If you are able to come over, you can ask the Northern Heavenly King to show you the way. Tianshu nodded with a smile. Probably because I haven't been out of the Beidou Palace much. I'm ashamed to say that I've not heard of it before. But after descending to the mortal world these few days, the vista in the heavenly court sure has changed some. Farewell for now. Let's go back again when we have free time. Sure, I responded, and watched as Tianshu walked over to Bai Yue Daijun's side. Yun replaced him, accompanying this immortal lord. Please come with me. I took a step forward, and Yun reached out a hand to stop me. Song Yao, Yuanju, this humble immortal wasn't talking to you. About you. The Jade Emperor's verbal instruction was for you to return to your residence and to rest for now. He looked at the heavenly soldier carrying furball. You, come with me. Now I was terrified. Yun was still very courteous when he spoke to me, and he even continued to address me as Song Yao Yuanjun. Evidently, the Jade Emperor had yet to give the command to strip me of my title and immortal status. This meant that his venerable self had a severe punishment in store for me. This immortal lord watched helplessly as Bai Yue led Tianshu and Yun led the heavenly soldier carrying furball further and further into the distance. The remaining heavenly soldiers bowed to me and said, Yuanju, we have been ordered to escort you back to your residence. When I looked up, Tianshu's tiny figure had already dissolved into the clouds and mist. Why didn't the Jade Emperor have me hauled to his palace for interrogation? What exactly was his venerable self up to? And Hengwen, how was he now? I feel like we might find out soon. Surrounded by the various heavenly soldiers, I returned my Guangshu Yuanjun's residence to my Guangshu Yuanjun's residence. Come to think of it, I had been in the heavenly court for so many years, fumbling for this title of Yuanjun without many attendants to show for it. Been rather envious at the sight of so many escorting Daijun and Hengwen during the morning sessions. Today, sandwiched in the midst of my own escort of heavenly soldiers, was this immortal lord who came in with pomp and panache. I know how to say it, I just can't right now. Panache. For once. For the first time, I seriously eyed my Guangshu Yuanjun's residence from afar and suddenly find it to be quite imposing with its plastered walls, ink-black tiles, and bright red-colored main gate. No wonder Hengwen had always loved to wander here, claiming my Yuanjun's residence to be much more comfortable than his Wei Yuan palace. How regrettable that in all these years I had not treated it with the care it deserved. When I walked over to the main gate, I felt even more terrified. The words Guangshu Yuanjun's residence were still sparkling on the plaque at the top. I sighed in dismay. Looked like his venerable self, the Jade Emperor, was furious. He intended to strip me of my title, tear down my plaque, confiscate my manor, strike off my immortal status, and whatever else to add some variety to my punishment. It was going to be a severe one, merely temporarily deferred. One of the heavenly soldiers opened the main gate and shoved me inside before shuttering it. I heard the clattering sound of chains being rapped, and then the click of the lock before it clanged against the doors. From the sound of it, this lock was not at all small. A sturdy divine dome overhead covered my residence, like a large inverted bowl, detaining me securely in Guangshu manner. For the first time, I also realized just how big my Guangshu Yuanjun's residence was. I strolled to and fro in the various chambers. The residence was empty, and I was its only presence. Sounds really lonely, man. The stone bed in the backyard where Hengwen and I had slept together after we got drunk the first time he had visited me. The remnants of the unfinished game of chess was still scattered on the chessboard beneath the magnolia tree. The 2 jars of fine wine hidden in the corner of the chamber in the left wing, the ones he had yet to fleece off me. The brush on the study table was still the same one Hengwen had offhandedly picked up the last time. Lu Jing had hunted him down for an important correspondence. The lotus ink painting hanging on the wall of my bedchamber that he had gifted me the first time he came around. The glazed screen, made from black jade that Hengwen had won in a battle of divine skills with Donghua Daijun, still displayed in the hall. I had unabashedly asked for it after telling him it was at odds with the furnishings in his Wei Yuan pavilion. Pillars on the covered walkways were still decorated with the phrases he had offhandedly written during our conversation about matching couplets. Before we descended to the mortal world, I had sparred with him in the courtyard, and in a moment of inattention, blown up a railing of the west side pavilion. To date, it still had yet to be repaired. As I moved from the chamber to the backyard, a voice sounded from beyond the divine barrier overhead. Song Yao, Yuanju, the Jade Emperor has ordered this humble immortal to bring you to the Peach of Immortality Garden for an audience with him. I mean, that was fast. For the life of me, I could not figure out why the Jade Emperor had to bring this immortal lord to trial in the Peach of Immortality Garden, and not Ling Xiao Palace. Of course, the Jade Emperor's intent was so easily guessed by the likes of me. His venerable self would not be the Jade Emperor. Resigned, I looked up. Hey, Yun, am I supposed to bring my residents with me to meet the Jade Emperor if you don't open up the divine barrier? Radiant were the blooms of peach blossoms in the Peach of Immortality Garden, and glorious were the rose-tinted clouds. The Jade Emperor sat upright in the pavilion. This immortal lord, being most discerning of the situation, walked over and fell to my knees with a thud. This offending immortal, Song Yao, pays his respect to the Jade Emperor. You sure are candid when it comes to confessing, the Jade Emperor said, his tone unhurried. I lowered my head. This offending immortal has repeatedly violated the rules of heaven while in the mortal world. I'm aware that there is no hiding the fact from the Jade Emperor's omniscient eyes, and so... The Jade Emperor cut me off mid-sentence. Forget it. Do you think you can pull the wool over my eyes by being so long-winded and writing a memorial? I've already shown your confession memorial to Hengwen and Tianshu, and he has told me everything. Alarmed, I jerked my head up. The Jade Emperor smacked his palm on the stone table with an icy expression. Song Yao, look at what you did in the mortal world. My mind was in turmoil as I quickly explained to the Jade Emperor. Jade Emperor, this is all this offending immortal's fault. You must not listen to the words of Hengwen. Hengwen, Qingjun. Qingjun was under my... The Jade Emperor jolted abruptly to his feet, flung his sleeves heavily, and said with a grim laugh, I naturally know the fault is yours. There is no pushing the blame onto someone else, even if you want to. You get yourself tied with Tianshu, and now you get Hengwen and Qingjun involved too. Song Yao, oh Song Yao. I sent you down to the mortal world, and you reaped yourself quite the bountiful harvest. I kept silent, and the Jade Emperor continued. You were a variable to begin with. No one could have expected you to ascend to the heavenly court that day. I went along with the will of heaven and let you remain in the heavenly court. Sure enough, more complications have arisen with this trip of yours to the mortal world. I prostrated over the ground. To begin with, this offending immortal became an immortal through no effort of my own. Tianshu Qingjun was right that day in Ling Xiao Palace when he said that I was still sentimentally attached to affairs of the mortal world despite my immortality. Hengwen Qingjun, he is ignorant of the ways of the secular world. In truth, I have lusted after him for quite a very long time. In making use of the opportunity accorded to me on this time around, I tantalized and seduced him. Qingjun, he is actually... This offending immortal knows my sins are unpardonable. Whether I am to be sent to the immortal execution terrace or totally obliterated, I deserve it. The Jade Emperor did not speak again. Following the trail of cool breeze, a pair of bees flew into the pavilion and chased after each other, right before the immortal lord's eyes. We got the Yowie bees. Anybody with a bingo card, cross off Yowie bees. With his hands behind his back, the Jade Emperor stood by the steps of the wayside pavilion, and the pair of bees, chasing after one another, flew over to his side. The Tao is, of itself, natural, attained by following one's heart, coming all together in one harmonious whole, the Jade Emperor said. The heavenly court is not like the Western paradise of Buddha, where one has to be without passion and love, desires and demands. However, the karmic cycle of cause and effect holds true for all living creatures, in heaven and earth. Immortals must go along with the flow, but they cannot escape reaping what they sow. The rules of the heavenly court are in truth meant to rectify one's conduct. Case in point, Nanming and Tianshu. The Jade Emperor strolled back to the stone table and sat down. Nanming has long developed feelings for Tianshu, yet he was harsh and merciless when he was putting Qing Tong and Shi Li on trial with Tathagata Buddha and me. He was already lacking integrity, and yet he was so severe in his treatment of others. If we disregard other karmic causes and effects, it was for that reason that he and Tianshu must undergo trials and tribulations after their banishment. This immortal lord suspected that the Jade Emperor's fury was scrambling his senses. No matter how I listened to these few words of his, they were not at all relevant to the topic at hand. Perhaps the Jade Emperor simply wanted to spout some high-sounding words, which was fine by me. There's love in the mortal world, as there is in heaven, but even in the mortal world, homosexuality was the exception, let alone in the heavenly court. This was the reason the Jade Emperor was omitting by disregarding the other causes and effects. I heard the Jade Emperor ask me, Song Yao, do you know what is the gravest of all sins you have committed this time? This offending immortal knows, I answered immediately. The offending immortal harbored the intent to seduce Hengwen and Qingjun with mortal desires, and the sin is unpardonable. The Jade Emperor rose to his feet again and walked along the wayside pavilion. After a moment he said, Go to Mingwei Xingjun. Let him inform you of the cause and effect. I looked up, uncertain, but the Jade Emperor had already made his way down the wayside pavilion. Several heavenly envoys instantly emerged from the peach blossom woods and followed the Jade Emperor out of the Peach of Immortality garden. Oh, okay. There were no 70 or 80 heavenly soldiers popping out of the peach blossom woods to detain me after the Jade Emperor left. The Peach of Immortality garden was silent all around. I could not sense even half a wisp of other immortals' breath. Come to think of it, the entire heavenly court was abounded with immortals, and the heavenly court was tightly and securely guarded all around. The Jade Emperor did not have to worry about me absconding. Besides, I wanted to know what the so-called cause and effect he referred to were. I took a slow stroll to the Peach of Immortality garden, thinking about every potential seed of cause before my ascension that would go on to bear the fruit of effect in the heavenly court. I ruminated it over, but I could not figure it out. Exiting the Peach of Immortality garden from the gate on the other side and walking along a narrow path would lead me to the back door of Mingwei Qingjun's Tianming Manor. I walked over to the door. Not far from this door was the lotus pond where I first met Hengwen. The sight of it, under such circumstances, utterly devastated my little heart. The clear breeze swept past, and in my daze I heard Hengwen calling out to me, Song Yao! Song Yao! I felt more and more melancholy. Hengwen's voice asked right in my ear, The Jade Emperor ordered you to head over to Mingwei Xingjun's residence. So why are you standing motionlessly before the door like a pole? I sighed. I saw the lotus pond and could not help but stop for a look. I realized something was amiss the moment the words were out of my mouth and whipped my head back. Hengwen was standing right behind me. He's right behind you! I fixed my eyes on him and reached out to touch him. He was real. Why do you look so panic-stricken? Hengwen asked. I thought you were being held in custody by the Jade Emperor, I answered honestly. So I was a tad startled when I saw you. Tapping his folding fan, Hengwen said, Hasn't Song Yao Yuanju righteously shouldered all the sins committed? So how could the Jade Emperor still hold me in custody? He raised the tips of his eyebrows and continued. Since you are dawdling here instead of heading over to Mingwei Xingjun's residence, I wonder if you have the time to sit with me by the pond and listen to me preach about cause and effect. Wen's tone was extremely unfriendly. I went along. Sure. I was about to say something else, but Hengwen was already striding vigorous steps towards the lotus pond. I could only catch up with him. The huge rock from back then, where Hengwen had laid out the paper to draw the lotuses, was still there. Hengwen found a spot to sit without thinking, while I hesitated a little, unsure if I should sit closer or further away. Eventually, I compromised at a spot I gauged to be neither far nor near. This lord can't be bothered to speak in a loud voice, Hengwen said, so come a little closer. I shifted about 3 centimeters closer to him. Hengwen frowned. Closer. I shifted another 3 centimeters. Hengwen quipped. Either you head over to Pixiang Palace now and borrow a set of skirts from any of the celestial maidens upon which you can continue hemming and hawing accordingly, or you can come closer still. I moved so close I was at Hengwen's shoulder, which finally satisfied him. I gazed at the lotus pond and said in a soft voice, Hengwen, actually, Hengwen reached out with his folding fan to cut me off. Since it is so hard for you to speak, don't expend your effort by continuing. Let's leave you aside for the time being. Tianshu has already reverted to his regular self, and at present he is like a walking corpse being detained in Yao Guang Palace. Let me first share an old story from the past with you. Even the tips of Hengwen's hair were emanating a chill. Not daring to defy him, I pricked up my ears and listened. Of Tianshu Xiangjun and Nanming Daijun, Hengwen began. One was the star of emperors, and the other was in charge of the nation's fortunes and destiny. From birth, they were destined to complement and support each other, to be inextricably connected to one another. After hundreds of years of entanglement, a thread of immortal bond finally formed between the two lords. When the thread of immortal bond first came into being, it was merely just a slip knot on each lord's fingers. In the heavenly court, if this thread of immortal bond was formed between two immortals, they must descend to the mortal world to undergo tribulations. This sort of thread was originally formed between a male and a female immortal, since the fusion of pure yang immortal energy and pure yin immortal energy was the natural way of heaven. Perhaps it occurred in this case because Tianshu and Nanming were too intimately involved with each other, resulting in a thread being unexpectedly formed between them. For that reason, the Jade Emperor sent them to the mortal realm to experience the world's tribulations. Whether the thread of a mortal bond is severed or tightened into a dead knot after these calamities is all left to heaven's will. So it turned out that Tianshu and Nanming had already underwent tribulations in the mortal world once before. Since there was such a deep-grounded connection to one another, why did the Jade Emperor send me to break up the lovebirds? Hengwen continued. Not long after Tianshu Qingjun and Nanming Daijun reincarnated into the mortal world, their thread of immortal bond broke. Tianshu's reincarnation in that life was more or less similar to the Mu Ruo Yan of this life. He was the descendant of a family of officials then too, and he was weak and frail by nature. Nanming was the young master of a military family. He grew up with Tianshu, and they were even fellow classmates. The immortals all guessed that Tianshu and Nanming's thread was certain to be unbreakable, that it would turn into a dead knot, but no one could have expected. Hengwen paused for a moment before continuing. No one could have expected a mortal to barge in between them and break the thread of a mortal bond. The thread that was supposed to tether him to Nanming ended up being forcibly bound to that mortal instead. Huh? Which fellow in the mortal world has this... What the heck? What is that? Weird. Sorry, something just fell from the bottom of the desk and I was making sure it wasn't like a spider. No one expected a mortal to barge in between them and break the thread of a mortal bond. The thread that was supposed to tether him to Nanming ended up being forcibly bound to that mortal instead. Huh? Which fellow in the mortal world has this much might? To think he was able to pull the divine thread off Nanming's hand and secure it to his own finger. Hengwen proceeded. That mortal was also a classmate of Tianshu, and he had been considerate and attentive to Tianshu when he was 11 or 12 years of age. There was even a time he protected him during a misunderstanding between Nanming and Tianshu, and it was from then on that the thread was severed. At first, the other end of the thread was merely stuck to that mortal's hand, but he showed such care and consideration to Tianshu every possible way, and the two of them were together all day long from childhood well into their adulthood, reciting poems in the breeze, and joining their beds to converse through a night. And so the thread went from merely sticking to that mortal's hand to being bound. Initially, it was a slip knot, but the tribulation Tianshu was destined to undergo in that life was the same as Mu Ruoyan, the execution of his entire clan and the confiscation of his family's properties. Tianshu was supposed to return to the heavenly court at that time, but no one expected the mortal to actually go against heaven's will and save Tianshu. He settled down with him in a small courtyard, as inseparable as could be. Left with no other alternative, Mingui Qingjun could only make Tianshu gravely ill. That mortal remained by Tianshu's bed, devoting himself to taking meticulous care of him. The day Tianshu finally returned to the heavenly court, the slip knot on that mortal's knot had already become a dead knot. The jade pendant that Tianshu has on him was a gift from that mortal. Even after thousands of years, he still carries it with him. So it turned out that such a story existed in Tianshu's past, one that left listeners sighing helplessly, including me in that moment. Is this going to be him? Like, an unwitting mortal? But like... This is why I like this author, because it's even like near the end, it's making me question things. Hengwen turned his head aside to look at me, and I marveled. Truly a moving past. Don't you find this past familiar after listening to it? Hengwen asked, tone icy. Familiar? Why would he suddenly use this of all words to describe it? Hengwen let out a scornful laugh. Look into the lotus pond. With a flick of his sleeves, the lotus flowers and leaves in the pond parted to reveal an unbroken expanse of water. A sudden silver light spread until the surface was a mirror. A scene appeared in this looking-glass. In the mirror there was a hall lined with short tables and chairs. A portrait of Confucius hung in the background of what was apparently a private school. Two children stood face to face with one another, their hands clearly connected by a golden thread. Of these two, one had delicate features, the face of the other was fierce. These must be the young Tianshu and Nanming. No matter how I looked, I could not help but feel familiar with this scene. Standing between these two children was another child with whom I found intelligent and lovable at first sight. Of course you would. This child was standing before Tianshu, shielding him with his chest puffed out. I felt that I recognized him, but could not place him. Looking utterly furious, Nanming bellowed, "This is none of your business. Step aside if you know what's good for you." That child, little big man that he was, retorted, "Do you have the capacity to make me step aside? I'm telling you, he's under my protection from now on. Don't even dream of bullying him if you can't get past me." Nanming stood, glowering, before resentfully turning his back. As he left, he slammed the table, and the golden thread on his hand slipped off and made contact with the edge of the table. That child, on the other hand, turned around to pet Tianshu on the shoulder. "Don't you worry. No one will dare to bully you when there's me, Song Yao, to have your back in this private school." I gasped, dumbfounded and thunderstruck. The child in the mirror tugged at Tianshu and pulled him outside. "Let's go out and play." His hand unwittingly pressed down on the tabletop from earlier, and the golden thread stuck to his hand, shining brightly as it connected him and Tianshu. Hengwen grabbed my left hand and flicked his finger. Wrapped around the root of my little finger was a piece of dazzling golden thread, and there at the end was a dead knot. How could this be? The child in the mirror was all grins as he tugged at Tianshu in the courtyard and said, "Du Wen Ming, you have to do a better job with my homework today." Du Wen Ming. I suddenly recalled the name. Stars swam before my eyes. Tianshu. Tianshu was actually Du Wan Ming? That Du Wan Ming? But how could Du Wan Ming and I have had an illicit homosexual love affair in the mortal world? Clearly what? The thread is already tethered to your hand, Hengwen said with a smile that was not a smile. I grasped him by his shoulders, not knowing if I should slam my head against the ground or pound my chest and stop my foot. "Oh, heaven and deities above, this is gross injustice." I wonder. I initially was going to end it here when I was studying the chapters, but it's a pretty short chapter. So luckily, we are not ending on a cliffhanger tonight. Maybe. We might still be ending on a cliffhanger. But we won't be ending on this cliffhanger. Chapter 23. Tianshu was Du Wan Ming. And Nanming, I remembered him too. He was called Jiang Shang Duo. No wonder he kept staring daggers at me after I ascended to the heavenly court. In truth, I had no grudges against him back then in the mortal world. His father was a second-grade military general, lower than my father's rank. So during the New Year and other festivities, his father would often send tributes of respect to my family. But this lad had had a backbone since he was a child, and he never came with his father to come calling at my house. I remember the name Du Wan Ming as a nightmare in my childhood. His father and my old man were both successful imperial examination candidates from the same batch of scholars, but his father's road to promotion had not run as smoothly as my father's, and he would later go on to become an imperial censor, a thankless job. Du Wan Ming was the same age as me. Even then, he was renowned as a child prodigy, and my father often compared me to him. Du Wan Ming could recite Mencius backwards when he was 3 years old, and I would stutter even reading the first 2 lines of Analects of Confucius at the same age. At 5 years old, Du Wan Ming could imitate the strokes of master calligraphers Wang Shixian, Xingxi, Shishi, Ji, and Wang Xiangxi. whereas my handwriting was still chicken scratch. When he was 7, his prose poetry, Ode to the Orchids, was widely read throughout the capital, but at the same age of 7, was not even sure what a poetic antithesis was. All day and all night long, my old man was envious of the Du clan's son, and it grieved him bitterly that no matter how he looked at it, his son, that was me, failed to live up to his expectations. When his heartache got too much, he would give me a taste of the rod. My father also often lamented with a sigh. I may have been lucky in my official career, rising above all the others. But several years later, when my son becomes an adult, the songs would be hard-pressed to match up to the dues. All the officials who served in the same administration as my father pooled money together to build a private school where they could send their sons to study. Its true purpose was to give a place for their descendants to build close friendships from youth, so that when they joined the imperial court as officials in the future, they could mutually look out for one another and pave the road forward. So kind of like Gusu with the Cloud Recesses lectures. When I was 10, Du Wenming enrolled in the private school, and my old man instantly kicked me into the same school. After I enrolled, I promptly discovered that there were many who were in the same shoes as me. Growing up, everyone had been compared to Du Wenming by their parents and suffered no end of grief. So, seeing the source of their troubles, they would gnash their teeth in resentment, and from time to time, they would find an excuse to take it out on Du Wenming himself. Du Wenming looked frail and delicate, and he was a pushover to boot. If someone were to bully him, he would endure it in silence without a single word, which only invoked everyone's desire to do it again. This went on, and the bullying he suffered worsened by the day. The Du clan and the Jiang clan, the latter being the family of the great and mighty general, were neighbors. So Du Wenming and Jiang Shang Duo grew up together, and Jiang Zhang Duo stood up for him. Their relationship was originally quite good. But one day, when I was passing by under the covered walkway on occasion, I saw a book, all covered in dirty water, lying in a puddle of mud in the yard. I thought someone had dropped it, so I picked it up and wiped off the muddy water with my sleeve. I was still in the midst of wiping it when I looked up and saw Du Wenming standing before me, silently watching. That was how I knew this book was his. Looked like the other children had thrown it into the puddle. I felt that since I had already picked it up and cleaned it, and seeing how pitiful Du Wenming looked, might as well do him a favor and return it. So I handed the book to him. He thanked me softly, and I magnanimously said "You're welcome" before continuing to the classroom. That afternoon, I lost focus and got caught sleeping in the middle of our lessons. As I was a repeat offender, the teacher flew into a rage and sent me to the yard to kneel and copy the treatise of prudent conduct 10 times as my punishment. It really is the Cloud Recesses. My heart was not really in it as I copied, and by the time class was dismissed at dusk, I had only written it 4 times. Seeing as everyone had left, I grew anxious that I would never finish. It was at this time that someone walked over to my side and bumped, as if unintentionally, into the pile of papers I had copied and stacked, sending it scattering to the ground. I looked up. It was Du Wenming. I was just about to curse when he squatted down and helped me to straighten out the pile. I watched as he slid out a roll of papers from his sleeve. Without even batting an eyelid, he unfurled it and stacked it on top of my barely completed pile. Then he got up and left. So he's an old hand at this, apparently. I looked askance at it. To my surprise, those papers were actually copies of the treatise of prudent conduct, and the handwriting on it was exactly the same as mine. I counted them. His stack had 5 copies done. Delighted, I wrote another one to make up the 10, handed them over to the teacher. The next day, I pulled Du Wanming over to a secluded corner and asked how he was able to imitate my handwriting. I often copy books for my elder brothers at home, so I can imitate other people's handwriting, Du Wanming explained. You helped me yesterday, so consider those few copies a token of my gratitude. This was unexpected. He really knew how to repay my kindness. Such an ability was simply too good to be true. Solemnly, I asked him, Then, if I help you out again the next time, will you thank me again the same way? You've helped me before, Du Wanming said, so just tell me if there is anything I can help you with. That was when I decided to take him under my protection. As my old man's official rank was higher than the others, the majority of the children in this private school took my lead and did as I said. So when I said I had taken Du Wanming under my protection, the bullying lessened. I also spoke of his ability to a few others who were on good terms with me. As the news spread to the rest of our school, all at once no one bullied Du Wanming anymore. They even fawned on him from time to time in order to get off doing a homework assignment. However, I fended them off too, fearing that if he was too swamped with other people's homework, he would not do a good job on mine. Oh, you are so generous. Other than myself, he was allowed to help 2 others at most. The other schoolmates could only twiddle their thumbs, waiting for their scheduled turns, with this one's homework reserved for today, and that one's reserved for tomorrow. Just as everyone was getting along harmoniously with one another, Jiang Shang Duo just had to start stirring up trouble. When he saw Du Wanming playing with me, he found some unreasonable fault with him, reproached him. Since I had already taken Du Wanming under my protection, I naturally could not let Jiang Shang Duo bully him, so I shielded him from his tirades every time. Du Wanming helped me with my homework every day, so of course I would not treat him shabbily. I took him to play with crickets, catch grasshoppers, and fly kites. I also counted him in when I played guessing games and dice and headed out to the fields in the countryside to steal wheat. I even gifted him a gourd for the crickets, a cage for the grasshopper, and the newest style of kite from Jiangnan that my old man's pupil had brought back to give me. After we'd started playing together, I realized that Du Wanming was actually not that bad a person. He was a loyal friend and quite sweet-tempered. One time, I took him to an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city to catch crickets, and though he was saved from falling into a well, a piece of jade slipped from the string around his neck and dropped in. There was a plop, and then it was gone. I stole a piece of my mother's precious jade to make it up to him. Mother did not really have that much of a reaction after learning that I was the one who had taken the jade. My father, on the other hand, flew into a rage and gave me such a thrashing with the big rod that I ended up limping for 5 or 6 days. I guess she was like, oh, he's making friends. And it wasn't the servants, so. We stayed in the private school together for 5 years. When I left school 5 years later, it was just in time for that youthful period of my life where I was fond of cavorting around. Joined by 3 or 5 like-minded buddies I knew from the private school, I traversed all over the capital city on horseback, drinking wine, seeking merriment, and visiting courtesans. I grew more and more distant from Du Wanming, someone with great expectations placed on his shoulders. He devoted his time to studying at home behind closed doors. At 16 years old, the emperor personally appointed him as the top scholar. He was bestowed with a 4th grade official post and joined the Hanlang Academy. My former schoolmates and I went together to congratulate him, and even though he was wearing the official attire of the Hanling Academy, his attitude was still as modest and amicable as ever. This worked my father up so much that he would sigh and groan whenever he saw that face of mine. Fortunately, my mother was rather philosophical about it. What does it matter if our son can pass the imperial examination or not? All it takes is a word if he wants to be an official. He's still young, and if he joins the official circle, he will only be on the losing end for nothing. Might as well let him enjoy his freedom for a few years. Let's get his marriage arranged first. Once he's married, he'll mature and settle down naturally. It wouldn't be too late for him to be an official then. My old man, thus convinced by my mother's words, finally took it into his stride, but who knew that things would not be working out as expected. His son, who was not only incapable of attaining scholarly honor or official rank, but was even doomed to a material solitude. The betrothals fell through one after another, and all those who caught my eye fled one after another. For all the flowers whom I had courted over several years, I could not get my hands on even a fraction of their pollen. My reputation as someone doomed to a fate of eternal solitude spread all over the capital, becoming a joke. Even the emperor struggled to fight his laughter whenever the topic of my marriage was broached in his presence. I was disconsolate. When I fell out of love the first or second time, that roguish company of friends would comfort me and drink with me to drown my sorrows. But as the frequency of these events grew, their first reaction when I sought them out became a burst of laughter before anything else. And so I went to drown my sorrows by my lonely, lonesome self. One day, as I was drinking my heartbreak away in a small wine tavern, I bumped into Du Wenming, who had just been dismissed from a court session. He did not have many words of comfort to say, but he was willing to listen to me pour out my woes, even drank with me. I did not expect him to still treat me as a friend after all these years without contact. So when I got my heart broken again and utterly crushed, I dragged him out for a couple drinks. Not once did he even make fun of me. He ever make fun of me, sorry. It was at that time that the emperor's younger sister finally married her little vice minister. After an unsuccessful attempt to make me a stand-in father for her unborn child, that something big happened in the capital court. Du Wenming's imperial censor father was implicated in an old case that occurred before the emperor's ascension to the throne, and the investigation showed that he had connections to the old faction of the prince who had revolted. As such, Du Wenming's family was convicted of treason. His entire clan was executed and their family properties confiscated. That was the day Jiang Shang Duo came to call on my house for the very first time ever. Forthright as he was, he got straight to the point as soon as he saw me. On account of your friendship with Du Wenming over the years, you should save him. I don't need you to remind me, I said. Truth be told, I've already saved him. The emperor had stolen away the wife I had yet to marry, and his younger sister almost made me a cuckold by making me a stand-in father to her child conceived out of wedlock. By all accounts, he owed me twice. On top of that, the emperor had also once mentioned that imperial censor Du's crime was merely a criminal charge, but as it involved the throne, he had no choice but to merit out the punishment. Then he had also lamented, whether wittingly or unwittingly, what a shame it was about Du Wenming. So I rescued Du Wenming from the death row by placing him with a corpse and saying that he had met with sudden death. To this, the emperor said nothing. We're almost there. We're almost there. I settled Du Wenming down in a small courtyard on the outskirts of the capital city, and often went to visit and play chess with him. I did not really read much of the classics, so I could not discuss those with him. When it came to chess, I could not beat him either. He was in poor health and often had difficulty sleeping, so there were times when we played until daybreak. The enclosing walls around the courtyard were adorned all over with climbing vines, with the luxuriant bloom of Lady Bank's roses in spring. Sometimes, after a night of chess, I would step out of the chamber early in the morning to be greeted with the particularly rich and pleasing fragrance of the roses in the morning mist. The physician said that this fragrance could alleviate the stifling tightness in Du Wenming's chest. Du Wenming did not weep his gratitude to me for saving him. His entire family had been beheaded, and he was now mostly a shell of his former self. He merely asked me once, with little emotion, if I were not afraid of being implicated in saving him, given the many risks involved. I thought, do you think I would do something I knew was futile? Of course, I had long known that the emperor would not pursue the matter. Besides, we were friends. I would certainly help him if it was in my power and ability to do so. Perhaps it was true what they say. No good deed goes unrewarded. Not long after settling Du Wenming in, I got a sudden glance back at the streets and saw Yao Xiang. I still felt a little heartsick remembering that name now. I fell in love with Yao Xiang at first sight and was genuinely and wholeheartedly in love with her. I did all I could to please her every day, even going as far as to ask Du Wenming for advice about some lovey-dovey poetry and romantic prose to share with her. In order to support and provide for her scholar, she pretended to treat me well. I was basking in the flush of love every day. But Du Wenming's health deteriorated by the day. He had been tortured in prison, and the head physician said his spleen was injured. To have lived past just a few days was already a feat. Fortunately, he did not suffer much at the end. He passed out from the pain twice and slept it away, and the last time he woke up, he even said thank you to me for taking care of him all these days. When he closed his eyes, he looked rather serene. He even left me a stack of copied poems so that I could recite them to Yao Xiang. I buried him by the emerald hillside on the city outskirts and gave special instructions to have someone watch over the grave mound. After that, Yao Xiang still got together with her poor scholar, and I ended up empty-handed, with nothing to show for my efforts. Forlorn, I bought wine to drink myself drunk. There were still 2 books of poems in the residence that Du Wenming had left behind, and these bitter poems and tragic verses resonated with me. I was heartbroken from the double 9th festival to the next year's Dragon Boat Festival. And the words Yao Xiang said to me in the temple dealt me such a huge blow that I saw stars. After that, I crossed the street and asked for a bowl of wonton noodles. And after that, I ascended and became an immortal Song Yao. Hengwen listened to me without saying a word. I grasped his sleeve. I have no idea how the Heavenly Court came to twist the story that way, but this is the real story. Actually, Hengwen said slowly, there is really no difference between your version and the Heavenly Court's version. I looked at the little finger on my left hand and my heart went cold. Hengwen, tell me the truth. I've always thought it was a coincidence that I could ascend to the heavenly court, but in truth... Oh, hi, Book Archive. Welcome! You're coming in right at the end. We have 4.5 pages left for tonight. But I'm really glad you popped in, and I hope you enjoy the stream. All right. Thank you. Hengwen, tell me the truth. I've always thought it was a coincidence that I could ascend to the heavenly court. But in truth, is it related to the fact that Tianshu and I are connected by this thread? Tianshu, Du Wenming. Since Tianshu was Du Wenming, even still keeping the jade I had given him, I would have been a familiar face after my ascension to the heavenly court. So why had he always put on a cold, indifferent attitude and pretended not to know me? Not quite, Hengwen said. The thread on both Tianshu's and your hands have turned into dead knots, but you are, after all, a mortal. As long as you undergo 5 lifetimes of reincarnation in the mortal world without meeting Tianshu, the thread would naturally break off on its own. But, one cast a resigned look at me. You sure are blessed with good fortune. Just so happened that Tai Shang Lao Jun's mortal elixir fell into the human world and you happened to eat it and ascend. So what if I had become an immortal? One sighed. Perhaps this is a fate beyond the control of even immortals. As long as you have become an immortal, and whether or not you remain an immortal after the fact, this thread is said to be unravelable, unless you or Tianshu is obliterated into oblivion. I looked at that glossy golden thread and flicked it with a finger. There was no sensation of having touched it, yet it quivered ever so softly. If it can't be undone, then all I have to do is leave it bound, I said. What is the consequence if I leave it on? They called it a thread of immortal bond, but I had it on for many years, having served no particular purpose. It's precisely because there is a consequence that Tianshu Qingjun pretended not to recognize you at first, kept his distance from you in the heavenly court, Hengwen said. The time he attempted to have you banished to the mortal realm had also been for the sake of protecting you. I remember telling you before that mortals born in the heavenly court, such as Tianshu and myself, have our duties all determined even before we took on forms. That is why I only have a title and not even a name like a mortal would. The same goes for Tianshu. He was born to take charge of the Beidou Palace. As the star of emperors, he is destined to reciprocate and complement Nanming Daijun. Understanding immediately dawned on me. I get it now. I butted in between them and severed the thread between Tianshu and Nanming, while getting myself hooked up to Tianshu. As a result, I messed up the mutual reciprocity between the two lords. But not once had I ever harbored the intent to come between them. So why did this thread have to take it as an interference on my part and insist on securing itself to me? And yet, you just so happened to pick up an immortal elixir that fell out of the blue. It's quite the luck, Hengwen quipped with a wry smile. You ascended and became an immortal, and the thread was no longer breakable unless one of you were obliterated. Although Tianshu Qingjun intended to keep his distance from you, both of you were still connected by that thread. Nanming Daijun took this to heart and bore a grudge, and the two lords gradually drifted apart. Calamities and wars became frequent occurrences in the mortal world, and dynasties unable to achieve stabilization, rose and fell in mere instants. To the heavenly court, this thread cannot be retained, but to sever it, it's either you or Tianshu who has to go. If you were the Jade Emperor, who between yourself and Tianshu would you retain? I mean, that's a little harsh. Tianshu. My answer was immediate. Hengwen turned his head aside to look at me. I sighed. You can skip the rest of it. I can guess it myself. The Jade Emperor wanted to annihilate me even before the doctrine dialogue, didn't he? That was why Tianshu attempted to find an excuse to send me down to the mortal world. In that case, why did the Jade Emperor design this whole show, saying that Nanming and Tianshu were banished to the mortal world because of their illicit affair, and having me set up trials to test the lovebirds apart? This was the part Mingwei Qingjun hemmed and hawed over when he told me the whole story earlier. It was only when... Okay. There we go. Gotten better at doing that. And I apologize that happened. Anyway. Resigned, Hengwen continued. In this case, Mingwei did out of good intentions to save you. You should thank him instead. The various immortals have developed some friendship with you all these years you have been in the heavenly court, and they can't bear to see you obliterated. For that reason, Mingwei told the Jade Emperor that, well, a dead knot cannot be undone unless one party is obliterated. You ascended under unusual circumstances and never once developed feelings for Tianshu in all of your years. He argued that there may be other ways to resolve this issue. Then Yu Lao added that it was a great sin to destroy others' marriage precedents by fate, which would ruin the person's own marriage as a karmic retribution. So Mingwei came up with this idea, and Tianshu told the Jade Emperor that he was willing to give it a try. Besides, Nanming's ruthlessness towards Qing Tong and Shai Lan meant that there was a debt to be repaid, and that was how you came to descend to the mortal world. It all made sense now. All the strange occurrences during this descent into the mortal world suddenly had an explanation. In all probability, Mingwei Qingjun was the one who had told Shen Qingling about the immortal herb. That was how Shen Qingling, a mere mortal, knew to steal it to save Mu Ruoyan's life. I looked at the lotus pond, adorned with lotus leaves as green as jade. Hengwen said, You really do owe Tianshu a lot. Du Wenming, Tianshu Qingjun. Looking back on it now, I still felt that I had not treated Du Wanming the best. I would have done the same for someone else, but this act had indeed severed his bond and reconnected to mine. By the end of it all, it had become a dead knot. Du Wanming had lived simply and was sweet-tempered. His appearance differed from Tianshu Qingjun too. No matter how I looked at it, I could not have imagined him to be the cold Tianshu. I had inflicted Mu Ruoyan with all sorts of abhorrent deeds. To protect me, Tianshu had been willing to descend to the mortal world to undergo tribulation, and yet I had treated him in such a way. What was he thinking now? And just how was I supposed to repay him for all I owed him? Hengwen did not say anything more, and sat side by side with me at the lotus pond. I looked again at my hand. I wonder if the thread will be gone if I hack off this finger now. You wish, Hengwen laughed. I'd like you to hack it off too. If it worked, the Jade Emperor would have done so long ago. Without your little finger, it can still secure itself elsewhere. Unless I was completely obliterated, and there was nowhere for it to bind itself to. I let out 2 quiet, wry laughs. Hengwen and I said nothing more as we remained sitting. After a while, I said, "The Jade Emperor ordered me to go over to Mingui Qingjun, so I better get going," I stood. "All right," Hengwen said. "I heard Xuan Li has also been brought over to the Heavenly Court. I'll go check in on him." I rose to his feet and I looked at him, but I did not know what to say. "Then this is farewell, I guess," Hengwen said. "Farewell," I said. I watched as Hengwen turned around and left, his back gradually receding into the distance, and for a fleeting moment, it was like I had just descended into the Heavenly Court for the first time. During that first encounter, I had also watched his back from afar as he gradually walked further and further away from me. I expelled a sigh of chilly air and entered Mingui Qingjun's residence through the back door. And on that note, that is the end of chapter 23 and the end of where we're going to read tonight. We have literally chapter 24, 25, an extra 26, an extra. Do we have one extra or two? Just one, and then the afterword. We are in the home stretch, which will be Thursday. But yeah, this author keeps me guessing, and I appreciate that. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me tonight, or later on, whenever you watch this video. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed me reading. And I know my voice is starting to get a little raspy at the end, so I apologize for that. And some of the sneezes, apparently, it's very yawny and sneezy time. But I'm excited. Let me check real quick about our poll for what to read next. Let's see. Let me check the post real quick. Oops. It looks like by popular demand, slightly more popular demand, we will be reading The Disabled Tyrant and His Beloved Pet Fish first. I'll make a little separate announcement about that, maybe on Wednesday. Maybe I'll actually see about doing like a little shorts video. Try out my hand at that. We'll see. But I am excited. That's one of my absolute favorites. And it's such a fun book. But anyway, I'm tired. I'm sure you're tired. This was a bit longer of a stream than I've been doing recently. But have an absolutely fantastic rest of your night or day or whatever time you're listening to this. And thank you so much for listening. Bye.